Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. We seem to have a couple of apologies. Would you?
We have apologies from Councillor Peter Frewer, and Councillors Tina Mackenzie Boyle and Tony Virgo are attending online. Can you confirm that you can hear us?
Hi, hello, I'm Tony Virgo, I'm from Manchester, and yes, I can hear you well.
Yeah, I think
that's
we can
yes.
hear him. Yes. Good, that's the pair of them. Oh dear. Of course, I need to just gather myself. No. So, for those of you who haven't attended a planning meeting before, may I just let you know this is a meeting in public, it's not a public meeting. We do have a couple of speakers for the first item after all the formalities. Can I just check that we have Avril Jones and Kevin Scott? Thank you.
Sorry, it's actually Avril Cowbridge. My email address is Jones, but my name is Avril Cowbridge.
Okay, thank you. Change that. Lovely. Okay. During the meeting, each item will be determined on its merits in line with planning policy and law. First, the case officer makes their opening presentation about this item. So perhaps we'd better do the formalities. We've got everybody here, and apologies. So I should have a print of this.
Minutes of the last meeting.
The minutes of the last meeting. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the minutes of the last meeting? Members? Any inaccuracies? May I propose then that those are taken as correct record? Do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Donna. So, no comments at all? Just
agreed.
all agreed? Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks. I will get to the top of this.
Declarations of interest.
Pardon?
Declarations of interest.
Thank you. Does anyone have a declaration of interest to declare? That's the other thing. It's item 3 is where the text is set out. None declared. Thank
No,
you.
there's none declared. Thank you, Chairman. Urgent item of business.
I'm sorry?
Urgent items of business.
Thank you. Yeah, do we have any urgent items of business?
There's no urgent items of business, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, I've just received a message from Councillor Zahiruddin. He is attempting to join online, but is having some technical problems, but will be with us shortly, hopefully.
Thank you. Hopefully he will show up shortly. Shall we let him in?
Yeah.
Thank you. I need a mouse. Okay, we have now. No, don't worry, I'll get there. We now get to our first item, which is the Mushroom Castle, Winkfield Road. May we have our officer present? Oh no, we do have an introduction from our legal person, Rachel Swan. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Before members proceed to determine this application, I would like to address correspondence that has recently been circulated suggesting that any decision taken by the committee this evening would be unlawful on the basis that officers have provided incorrect advice regarding biodiversity matters and that they have failed to take account of material representations. Having reviewed those concerns, I would advise members as follows. Firstly, the Binfield Badger Group is not a statutory consultee. However, notwithstanding that status, the comments submitted by the group have been taken into account by officers as part of their assessment of the application. Secondly, representations from the Binfield Badger Group are not routinely published on the Council's website. This reflects the group's request that their submissions are not placed in the public domain due to the sensitive ecological information they may contain. Thirdly, members will note that paragraph 9.29 of the committee report refers to the updated ecological impact assessment, the landscape and ecological management plan, and the construction environmental management plan for biodiversity. Those documents specifically identify amendments that were made in response to comments received from both the Council's biodiversity officer and the Binfield Badger Group. The ecological information submitted also addresses impacts on a range of protected species and wildlife interests and has been reviewed by the Council's biodiversity officer, who has considered and deemed them acceptable. I am therefore satisfied that officers have considered the impact of the proposed development on protected species and that these have been properly considered in accordance with the Council's statutory duties. In relation to biodiversity net gain, members are reminded that the outline planning application was submitted and determined before the mandatory biodiversity net gain regime came into force. Nevertheless, a minimum 10% biodiversity gain was secured at the outline stage through a combination of on-site habitat enhancements and contributions towards off-site measures, together with long-term management secured through the Section 106 agreement. As those matters were secured through the Outline Planning Permission, they do not fall for determination under this reserved matters application that is before members this evening. Members were also advised of this position at the previous committee meeting. However, it is worth noting that biodiversity net gain information that has been submitted at the reserved matters stage has been reviewed, and that review confirmed that the measures secured through the Outline Planning Permission and associated Section 106 obligations remain sufficient to achieve the agreed 10% net gain in biodiversity. Accordingly, I remain satisfied that all relevant biodiversity and ecological matters have been properly considered and that members are able to lawfully determine the application before them this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That clarifies a few things, I hope. May we have the officer's presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Margaret McKevitt, the Planning Officer, presenting this application. As members will recall from last month's discussions, this application is for reserved matters for scale, layout, appearance and landscaping for 39 dwellings, including affordable housing, together with landscaping, parking, amenity space and refuse storage. The application was deferred from the June Planning Committee for further consideration of the design and height of the apartment building. Following that meeting, the applicant has submitted amended plans showing the proposed apartment building reduced in height to 2.5 storeys, and the application is being presented back to the Planning Committee for determination. I believe members visited the site at the weekend. Outline planning permission, with all matters reserved except for access, was approved in November 2024. This was granted following an amendment to the application initially considered by the Planning Committee in September 2023. And the outline permission includes various conditions which are still relevant. They relate, including matters relating to biodiversity, a construction management plan, details of the access construction, and details of finished floor levels. And it's intended that the construction management plan will include details of working hours and construction vehicular access, which is intended to be from Gardeners Road. And as members will recall, the site is an allocated housing site in the Bracknell Forest local plan for 40 dwellings. On the site, houses are shown to be 2 and 2.5 stories in height, with the apartment building ranging from a single storey up to 2.5 stories in height. The 3-storey element of the apartment meant that the maximum height of the building would have been 12.24 metres high. This has now been reduced, so at the highest ridge point now measures 10.79 metres, a reduction in 1.45 metres at the highest roof point, which members can see in the plan on the screen. The other buildings on the site include 2.5-storey houses, which are 9.9 metres high, and 2-storey houses being 8.4 metres high. Amended plans do show the relationship of the apartment to the closest property, Woodland House. The apartment building is 5.84 metres from the side boundary with Woodland House, and that property is positioned a further 2.6 metres from the boundary, giving a separation distance of 8.44 metres. As the ground levels are lower on the application site at this point than land to the east, as can be seen, the ridge height of the apartment building would be slightly below the roof ridge of Woodlands House. Further matters considered, covering trees, landscaping details include the provision of areas of open space on the west and the southern boundaries of the site. Trees will be lost to create the vehicular access to Gardeners Road, but no trees to be lost are covered by TPOs. The submitted arboricultural impact assessment considers that the poplars east of the site will not be damaged by the development, and full consideration in that report has been given to the root protection areas of the poplars. Centrally in with the site, see if I can get the cursor there, there's an oak tree which will be retained, and also an oak has been referred to by members at the site visit at the entrance of the site. And this was fully taken into account at outline application stage when the proposed vehicular access was narrowed at that point to protect that oak tree. As part of the application, a submitted landscape and ecological management plan, which will be an approved document, takes full account of wildlife protected in the Wildlife and Countryside Act and the Badger Protection Act. Mitigation measures to protect badgers and their routes through the site are included within the LEMP, and it also involves measures such as a badger gate and retention of grassland. Fencing on the site will include hedgehog holes to allow free access of hedgehogs throughout the site. Contribution was secured in the Section 106 towards a reptile mitigation programme. The LEMP also includes details in measures such as shelters for slow worms and bird and bat boxes, which will be provided. And as our legal advisor mentioned, the outline application was submitted and determined before mandatory biodiversity net gain, but a net gain in biodiversity was secured in line with the NPPF at that time. And in terms of provision of the Section 106 agreement, both on-site and off-site provision was allowed for, and a financial contribution. And it was considered that a total of, to make the 10% BNG, total of 9.21 units would be required, and it was considered that 8 of those units could be provided on site, particularly through hedgerow management and an improved hedgerow provision on the site. And other units would be provided off-site, and the contribution would secure that. And the reptile mitigation contribution I've mentioned will also secure the equivalent of 1.04 off-site habitat units. So in terms of habitat units, the site will deliver more than 10% in habitat units on and off the site, which is permitted even under the mandatory scheme. In terms of open space, in addition to the open space shown within the site, The site does adjoin the Warfield Park Sang and the Bracknell Forest Council managed green space at Osmonds Wood, and that also assists in protection of wildlife that currently travels across the site but has habitats and routes close by. Looking at drainage, a drainage strategy was approved as part of the outline planning permission. An additional condition has been provided and shown in the main report to secure the southern ditchway. Following that, the applicant has confirmed that as there's no change to the ground levels, there is no change to the provision of the drainage strategy in terms of foul water strategy, which allows for gravity drainage to Gardeners Road, and the drainage officer is satisfied with the drainage strategy as already approved. I'll go through the provision. The applicant has submitted perspectives to show the relative heights and ridge heights of buildings compared to on the adjacent site, which I think members had the benefit of when they visited the site. And the design of the apartments, as seen there, there's been a drop in the roof height and provision of apartments within the roof space. The photo on the site shows this is where the vehicular access will be provided through the adjacent Aldridge Park. And this photo shows the poplars on site, which the application does make provision for the safeguard in terms of consideration of the root protection area as part of the arboricultural impact assessment. So other views there of the poplars to the rear of this site. And some further views of Chavey Down Road, which shows the extent of the sheltering of the site from distant views. A supplementary report has been prepared, which includes details of additional letters of representation received and includes 2 further conditions which are considered to be necessary to ensure boundary treatment is secured to satisfaction and to ensure the privacy of adjacent properties, and to allow for street trees to be provided where possible and details to be submitted. The recommendation is as set out in the main report with additional conditions in the supplementary report is that the Assistant Director Planning be authorised to approve the application subject to conditions set out in the report and supplementary report, amended, added to or deleted as the Assistant Director of Planning considers necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I believe we have our speakers. Would Arul Chowdhury please come to the desk? Have you shown her what to do? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, you're good. Okay, I'll do that. It's 3 minutes. Yeah. Okay. You'll be given 3 minutes, but at 20 seconds left, we'll say 20 seconds, and you carry on until the beep. Thanks. Are you ready?
Committee, I'm speaking on behalf of residents. You're being asked to decide based on an incomplete, inaccurate and legally flawed record. Publishing a technical supplementary report 24 hours before this meeting is a breach of procedural fairness that prevents proper legal scrutiny. Proceeding tonight puts the Council at risk of a judicial review. Residents are aware of their legal rights. The proposed flats are too high. The severe massing issue is entirely out of character and directly conflicts with the Winkfield local plan. This design causes an unacceptable loss of light, yet there is a complete absence of a professional daylight assessment. There is zero clarity regarding the footpath on a turning circle endangering public. The supplementary report attempts to defer substantive protections, including privacy screening, tree planting, and biodiversity delivery plans to post-approval conditions. You are being asked to vote blind. Leaving these critical issues to be decided behind closed doors by officers completely bypasses further committee or public scrutiny. At the last meeting, the planner incorrectly advised biodiversity cannot be considered at reserve matters. Under the Town and County Planning Order 2015, reserve matters explicitly include details of landscaping, which legally covers habitats. The Environment Act 2021 requires biodiversity to be integrated into all planning stages. The Council is relying on an outdated ecological reports and ignoring site data. Verifiable new photo evidence of active badgers, cubs and hedgehogs is material information you are legally bound to review. The superficial proposal of badger doors blocks hedgehog highways and fragments habitat, directly violating policy W8 of our neighbourhood plan. The planner stated the 13 poplar trees in the last meeting will be retained. In reality, the developer only owns one. The developer cannot use property they do not control to pad out their metrics. This explicitly violates the statutory biodiversity gain hierarchy under Article 37A. A formal corporate challenge regarding the accuracy of this official record is actively under
20
review
seconds.
with the CEO. Forcing a vote tonight on an incomplete record is a direct breach of natural justice. Do not make a legally vulnerable decision. Defer this application until the record is complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Would you like to stay there?
Questions,
We
sure.
allow questions of
Yeah.
fact only, please. Do you have questions, please? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. In your presentation there, you referred to loss of light and suggested an omission of daylight assessment. I was just wondering if you could expand upon what you believe to be the light issue there.
Yeah, well, I think Rakesh Harji has submitted an objection on the 15th of July, which covers this very well. He's talked about daylight and sunlight assessment, still not published. It's basically, to give you a blunt answer, the flats are going to completely block out lights in the garden and the houses surrounding the flats, particularly Woodland House.
Councillor Hayes.
Just very quickly, in this you state the planner stated that 13 poplar trees will be retained.
Yes.
Who's the ownership of the other 12 then, if you're stating?
We own 6 and our neighbour owns 6.
So therefore you could take those trees down if
We
you
could
wanted
chop
to.
them down if we chose to, yeah.
They're
They're not in the control of the developer.
Or the council haven't
Oh.
TPO'd? Or...
No, they're not TPO'd.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Further questions? Does no. Councillor Collins, please.
Hello.
Sorry, who am I looking at?
Me.
Oh, sorry.
You've mentioned about turning circle and a footpath.
Yes.
Where is this turning circle and footpath that you're referring to?
Well, to be quite frank, we are confused because we thought the footpath was completely gone and the developers are having a fence all around. But following the visit last Saturday, we are under the impression that there's still a view that people can walk through from the estate into Mushroom Castle. The turning circle is right next to the houses that Woodland House is part of, the new
That's
houses.
where we all met.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Is it? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone online have a question for our?
I put my hand. I'm sorry, it's Tony Virgo. I put my hand up, but
Sorry, Tony, I didn't think about you asking questions of the speaker. Please go ahead.
thank you. Avril, can I just ask two questions?
Yeah.
First question. We had pictures of animals, quite extensive, Are the animals a regular activity in that area?
We have the animals that you saw in that picture every single night. The hedgehog was out in the day in the picture because it was a very hot day and he was thirsty. He's often only out at night. We are visited every night by several foxes, deer, badgers and hedgehogs. And if anybody doubts that, they are quite welcome to come to our house 9 o'clock at night and view them for themselves.
Thank you, that's lovely.
Thank you.
Could I have one more question, please,
Yes, please go ahead,
Madam Chairman?
Councillor Virgo.
Admiral, you mentioned the Town and Planning Act, and I think you said 2015 regarding biodiversity,
Yeah.
and therefore it could be discussed
Yes.
at final condition stage.
Yes.
Is there any reason that you can see where the council could refuse to do that?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Tony.
Well, I
sorry.
suppose there seems to be a difference of legal opinion between
Yes.
the council
Yes.
and what
Oh,
you found online
right. Yes.
referring to the Town and
Okay.
Planning Act. I'm just interested as to why there seems to be that difference of
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, the council insists this is not an EIA application, and that designation does not exempt them from, or the committee, from these statutory environmental duties. UK case law dictates a council cannot hide behind a past screening decision when substantial new data comes to light before a final vote. And substantial new evidence has come to light. We've submitted that with our photos, particularly not just the badgers, but badger babies. And they will be looking to create new sets all the time, which is why the survey, the walkthrough survey, is out of date. In addition, I spoke with somebody from the Badger Society just this evening before our meeting, and she confirmed to me, since the objections have been submitted, no one from the council has ever communicated with them, and no one from the developer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins?
Can I just ask, do you mean the Badger Society? I think it's the Badger, or do you mean Binfield Badger Group?
Binfield Badger
Group, thank you.
Well, I thought they were society, but they might be group.
Thank you.
They're the people who submitted the objection letters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions online or in the room? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thanks.
May we now have our agent,
Kevin Scott.
Kevin Scott. Mr. Scott, you know how this goes, I'm sure. So you have 3 minutes, and I'll shout at, or say 20 seconds. At 20 seconds, you carry on until it stops.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening again, members. As you'll all be aware, and as we've just heard since the last meeting, a number of things have happened, including the revisions to the apartment building to reduce its height, the submission of further information to show precisely the relationship of this building to woodlands. I think there's a relationship that wasn't clear at the last meeting, and of course you've now had the opportunity to visit the site. And thank you also for taking the time to read the briefing note we circulated earlier. And I'm not going to use my time to repeat that, so just going to focus on a couple of other things. But I hope that has given you the reassurance and understanding of the actual impact of the apartment building, and can see that it meets all of the relevant standards in terms of privacy and outlook, etc. And I'd just like to maybe pick up on the point, the sunlighting, daylighting point, the question that was raised. The reason there is no detailed sunlighting and daylighting report is because one isn't required, because of the proximity of the building to its neighbours, the lack of conflict with the 45-degree guidelines. These are the things that would trigger or require you to look further at those things. The building doesn't require us to do that. And I would like to stress that this reserve matters application for 39 dwellings, fewer than that which the council has already granted permission. It satisfied the requirements of that permission and the council's technical consultees across a range of issues. The applicant bought this site with the outline planning permission in place and has undertaken pre-application discussions with officers to get to this point. We've made further changes to respond to members' concerns and have agreed to further tree planting in response to a recent request following the site visit. But we are now at a point where a decision must be made, and we obviously hope that you'll support the officer recommendation for approval. And I'm probably breaking one of my self-imposed rules this evening by mentioning an appeal when I'm talking at committee. I don't normally do that, but there's not much point tiptoeing around the point. If you can't support the recommendation, that's inevitably where we'll be. And I'm not teaching you to suck eggs. You know the background to this and the housing land supply position. But for the council to be successful at appeal, you'd need to demonstrate that any possible harm that you feel the development might cause would have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, which meets all of your standards. It's an allocated site and provides the full amount of affordable housing already part of the housing land supply. And that can't be the case here. So that even if you're not 100% comfortable with every aspect of the scheme, given the high bar required by the NPPF and the tilted balance, we'd ask that you support the recommendation and allow the benefits of the housing and affordable housing to be delivered without the delay of a costly appeal. Possibly I'll leave it there and then I can answer any questions members might have on some of the points that have also been raised by the previous speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Penfold.
Where the apartment buildings are being planned, there is quite a slope. Will the land be actually dug out so it is lower, it lowers the apartment building, or will it be built up to make the flat area to build on?
We're not planning to build up the levels from where they are now. Those levels you've seen are taken from the topographical study.
Right, thank
we're
you.
also relying, sorry, we're relying on those levels to give us the surface water drainage at that part of the site to the ditch at that end. So that's the situation.
Thank you.
Anyone online?
There's no questions online.
No questions.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please do. Councillor
Oh,
Vago.
okay. Could I just follow that, if I may, sir? When we did the site on Saturday, the lower part of the site, as you have described, is not just low on its own, it's undulating, actually. So it goes up and down. And I think the previous speaker was really saying, surely that has to be levelled. You can't build something on an undulated site. So my question is, if it's undulating, surely it has to be levelled in some way for you to put foundations in.
I mean, that's a fair point, that it's not going to replicate precisely the existing landform that you have at the moment, but we're not building levels up above the levels that you can see there at the moment. So you will have, by laying out the slabs and the foundations, there's a regularity brought to that you don't have at the moment, but the overall levels aren't changing. It's not elevating it it's not reducing it, but there will be some equalisation across the footprint of that building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mackenzie Boyle, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for your report, sir. Could you tell me, please, in your considered opinion, what is affordable?
Well, there are different definitions of affordable, and there are different mixes within the tenure that we've put forward. I haven't got the report in front of me, but there is I think these questions are often asked on the expectation that the product is shared ownership or something like that. But there are different rent structures that are worked out with the Housing Association. This is not a scheme that is heavily weighted towards the shared ownership end. If you give us some time, I can find the relevant bits in the report, or officers might be able to provide you that. But it's not a single tenure, not a single mix, and definitely leans towards the affordable rented sector rather than the shared ownership, which I know and understand some people have some reservations about.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes, please.
Carrying on from Councillor Virgo's request, when saying about the levelling and movement of earth will be to make it viable to be able to build, drainage.
Yeah.
The problem with the flooding they have now, what is your views on what you would be able to attain to stop the flooding that would happen with the movement of soil in there? And it will happen.
It won't be so much the movement of soil, it's just that will, I think we are looking to, I'm probably going to look to my client, but I think in the discussions that we had with the drainage officer, we were looking at whether it's possible to deal with some of the blockage that has already happened along part of that ditch at the moment. But I think there is an existing problem there that hopefully we can actually do something to improve rather than make worse.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle?
Yes, may I? And thank you again, Chair. Sir, is this in your bailiwick to let me know? Are you going to be letting us having a construction plan?
Construction management plan.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a condition to that effect somewhere either across the outline or in the detail here, and we would normally consider that to be normal and good practice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Could I ask one more question, if
Yes,
that's
please.
possible? Could I just ask one more question about the drainage? Councillor Hayes asked. There is flooding in Woodland House into the garage. I mean, there's photographs of it. Do you think that you would have to put soakaways, or is the idea of the drainage to go to some converts and, as it were, push away? Because there is, I mean, Councillor Hayes mentioned it, but there is flooding in that site, and of course it all slopes down. That's partly the reason, of course.
Yeah, I was probably going straying slightly off my area of expertise as a detailed drainage, but we wouldn't have any impact on the existing problem with woodlands. And I don't think the intention is to use soakaways. I don't think that's viable. It's certainly not proposed in the scheme. Does that help at all? Sorry, I may not have understood the question fully.
No, it's okay. I just, I suppose we're worried that because woodlands also is above ground and therefore sloping away, a lot of that water, including the sewage outlet to, because they're not on main drainage, would go in. Sorry.
Sewage would be entirely separate. So the sewage would
I understand.
Be, yeah,
I understand.
So we wouldn't be impacting on that in any way. That would all be discharged to Gardeners Road.
But there is, sorry, let me be clear about this. There is a drain, a ditch, which serves two properties. One of them is Woodside House
Yes.
on the outlet of their sewage plant. So that water would slide into the site.
Would
We-
this,
I
mean, we
there's
actually
a level of detail I'm struggling to answer with that.
Okay.
But
would it be more appropriate to ask the case officer this sort of thing? And we also have our drainage officer online?
If you have the drainage officer, I would certainly defer to their expertise
Okay,
and
that's
experience.
fine. I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Mackenzie Boyle.
Thank you for your patience, Chair. And also thanks to you, sir. Can I ask, please, what you're going to be doing about delivery of trees along the streets? It's part of the NPPF, I do believe. Will you be delivering street trees?
Definitely, trees have always been part of the proposals there, but I think I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but I know we had a request to see whether they could be further improvements to those, which we're very happy to do. And I think one of the conditions that's on the supplementary report would require further details, and that's with that in mind, to sort of add further street trees throughout the scheme, but primarily on that access from Gardeners Road and with the adjoining open space.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. No further questions for the moment? Councillor Hayes.
Maybe that it is. I think
This-
it might
this-
be
the
the officers.
question should
It
be
is a
on
question
what the-
whether
the-
you deal with the waste as well, removal of the bins and things.
Okay.
Should I be asking the officers about that?
I mean,
The officers. I'll deal with the officers. Thank you.
okay.
This is really questions on what our speaker spoke about. Thank you. I do believe that's everything.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Patience. Okay. So, shall we ask FWA to speak on the flooding and drainage straight away? Is FWA, are you there? Please.
Yeah,
Yes.
through you, Chair.
Oh, lovely.
I'm here. Yeah, evening all. FY here, the drainage officer. So I understand that the drainage strategy was has been approved as outlined. So I'd like to have specific questions. I haven't got any presentation about this particular scheme, so I'm happy to take questions if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Collins.
I was concerned about the levels changing on the site, but I think I've been reassured that they're not, apart from superficial changes that are needed for construction. We've been told that the system to remove waste will be gravity drainage. Could you explain to me how that will work? Because at the bottom of the site to the top of the site, there is quite a slope. If the sewers are in Gardeners Road, which is what I believe, but if you could confirm that as well, please.
Okay, so I'll quickly share my screen. So as you can see, can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
So this is the drainage strategy. So even though the site slopes southwards, the finished floor level is 74. So as you can see here, 74.5, and the drainage has been designed to flow northwards. So it goes all the way to Gardeners Road, and there is an inset here. You probably will not see it quite clearly, but the Thames water sewer into which connection is proposed, the invert level is about 68.34. So it's quite deep into the ground. So there is a level difference of about 4 meters, if not more. So that allows gravity connection to be feasible at the site. So just by virtue of the invert level at Gardeners Road of the Thames water sewer is quite deep into the ground. So it makes it possible that even though the site slopes southwards, gravity connection is also feasible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Virgo?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just go on with that, FRAD, please? Do I understand that the effluent would then go into a sewer in Forest Road, and that would then continue down Cricketers Lane? Is that correct?
Sorry, are you talking in terms of surface water or foul water?
Foul water.
Yeah, so for foul water, in this instance, it goes northwards towards Forest Road. So it's not going eastwards towards Cherrydown, it goes northwards.
No, but the actual sewer, as I understand the sewer layout, goes along Forest Road, and then it takes a left down Cricketers Lane to a link at the bottom of Cricketers Lane to the Bracknell Road, and it goes on eventually to the sewage disposal works at Binfield. But the thing that worries me enormously, and always has done, and I think I've mentioned this so many times, is that the pipe which takes it along Cricketers Road is very small.
Okay, I understand your question. Let me quickly share screen as again to maybe help clarify the point. So this is the point of connection that the applicant is looking to connect into. So the red line is the foul water network, and the blue line is the surface water. So concentrating on the foul water for a moment, as you can see, it's clearly shown in the arrows that it travels northwards. And I understand the pressure that is on the network as it approaches Haley Green. And I will not be able to comment on capacity issues because it is Thames Water's jurisdiction. But I think there's a little bit of assurance that there are sewage tanks
Yeah,
along the
it is.
network.
It
Yeah,
is.
I'm glad that you confirmed that because I couldn't see that on aerial maps or anything. So that could
Yeah.
help to alleviate some of the pressure that is coming from southwards. And it might or might not have any capacity impacts as you go towards Haley Green. And there's a condition on there for the developer to contact Thames Water to get approval before any connection into the network to get confirmation that there's capacity in there. So that is clearly stated in one of the conditions in the outline application.
Could I just add something here? Because where you pointed to, Evelyn, there is flooding in Lambrook School, I think, has been. This extra pressure would only increase that, of course, no matter what you're going to do in terms of flow. And that particular pipe we're looking at is less than all the other pipes around. I know this quite well because I've been through it with Thames Water on site. And they were always very concerned about the flow, extra flow going down that single pipe. The one in Wingfield Road, you know, the other one across the way is a bigger pipe, but that's a very small pipe, as it looks like actually on this. I just wondered if, I know this is a Thames Water problem, but I wonder if we could keep on the ball here and make sure that this is correct and, you know, that it is capable of taking that effluent.
Yeah, so that will come out of the discharge of condition application when the applicant has submitted sufficient information to Thames Water seeking for their verification on capacity. And by all means, if there is capacity issue, then they'll be working with Thames Water to improve the network before any discharge is made into it.
And this will come back to you, will it?
Yes, so the condition specifically says we have to consult Thames Water. So yeah, we will have to look at the application to Thames Water and whatever response that Thames Water provides in terms of whether there is their consent for discharge or if there are any issues. And then I think the next steps will be whether to improve it before any discharge is made into it. But this is all a pre-development condition. So the applicants will not be able to do anything unless such issues have been resolved.
Okay.
In terms of construction.
Understand, thank you. And just moving to groundwater, does this groundwater, which it is a problem there, as you probably know, with flooding when we get a lot of rain, which obviously clearly isn't at the moment, but does some of that water go into the balancing pond in Carnation area? Is that the idea? Because there's a balancing pond there before it goes across the way and goes through Lambrook roughly to join the cut.
Yeah, so from what I can see on the screen, yeah, it does. So they'll make connection into the drainage network at this point in the network, and then it goes northwards into the pond. But I must state that this is flows that has been attenuated quite tremendously because they have provided underground tanks on the site. So I think the flows has been reduced to the region of about 2 or 3 liters per second, which is quite low, is the Greenfield runoff rate. And that is what we can push for as stipulated in legislation.
Okay, and just one supplementary, please, Chairman. Sorry to keep on. On Woodland House, there is an outlet, which is the sewage outlet from their plants, because they're not on main drainage. That flows into a ditch, which flows into the to the site. I just wondered if you'd looked at that and how that could be rectified. I understand it smells, so I'm told by the resident, quite badly at times, which suggests to me that the plant isn't absolutely accurate, but there you go. I just wonder if that's been looked at and that something could be done about it.
So yeah, excuse me, I visited the residents of Woodhouse just to understand what is going on. And yes, I can confirm that they are not on the sewage network. They don't connect into the public sewers, and they have underground treatment plants that connect into the ditch along here. So
Yeah.
that is quite an acceptable form of discharge of foul water. So I think the smell, which I also experienced on the site, is all due to maybe workmanship or some form of default in the installation of the system. One of the residents, I think the one closer to the site, had rectified the situation. I think it was more her other neighbor that she was hoping that she also rectify it, and I think they were having a positive dialogue of doing that. So the strategy was approved, but sometime during construction, things go wrong. I'm not sure what the issues are, but they understand there's an issue that needs to be rectified at their own expense.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I think we'd better move along to have a few questions for the officer, please. Who would like to start? Councillor Collins.
There is continued confusion about whether or not Mushroom Castle is accessible from the site. I believe it isn't, but just for the room, can you please confirm that it is not accessible either by vehicles, pedestrians, or I guess cycles as well?
Through you, Chair, Andy Wells, Highways Development Management. I confirm there is no access between the site by any modes of transport between the site and Mushroom Castle.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You said vehicles. What about by foot?
I said by any mode of transport. That includes on foot, by bike, or in any other way.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I think we've received quite an unprecedented level of legal advice from both the objectors and the applicant. We don't normally get quite such input on those matters. I just wondering, obviously we have our own legal advisor in the room. I just was wondering, is there anything that has been said by either of those parties, obviously further to the clarifications you've already provided in your statements earlier, that you feel as members you would like to sort of clarify or correct in any way, just so that we're completely clear?
Through you, Chair.
Thank you.
I think I summarised everything that I wanted to in my initial statement, but just to say that a lot of what was said is incorrect, but I'll go back to the statement that I made at the beginning, where I clarified specifically the areas that we felt needed to be addressed and responded to in that respect.
Do you want specifics on those things?
I think I'm happy if the legal advisor has conveyed the information she believes we need to hear. Yep.
Lovely. Councillor Collins first.
Ask Stephen to clarify about the TPO.
Yeah. Yes, please do.
Right. We've heard two opinions from speakers. One, that no sunlight and daylight assessment is required, and the other that it is required. Can the case officer confirm for us which it is, please?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I concur with the view that the second speaker gave, that due to the distance between the proposed apartments and Woodland House as a nearest property, that a formal daylight and sunlight assessment is not needed. Reference was made to the 25-degree angles, and I believe that it's not met. Obviously, daylight and sunlight assessments take place on impacts on windows of properties rather than gardens or patio areas, but I'm satisfied that due to the distance between those properties, that a formal assessment is not required.
Just a supplementary to that, which you've reminded me of, are there any windows in Woodland House which will overlook any flats? And likewise, are there any windows in the flats which may overlook Woodland House?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'll just get my presentation up to see the site plan of the nearest windows from the apartment buildings. As seen here, the closest angle of the apartments does not have windows in, and the windows are in the wing that is this wing here facing outwards, which I think the distance that was 21 metres to the boundary. And from the visit again on Saturday, I don't believe there are any windows to rooms in Woodland House that would be affected. Windows have to be to a main living room or bedroom, and I don't believe that there's an impact on those distance, either of light or of direct privacy. And obviously members were on site themselves and saw the relationship.
Councillor Smith and Councillor Virgo.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that question, while we've got that image on screen. Moments too soon. It looks to me on the image that there's residential balconies on the south-facing facade, which, yes, you can see there, which look to be obviously somewhat higher than the fence to the Woodlands property. Is there any concerns there with regards to overlooking and privacy of that garden?
Through you, Chair, given the distances and the oblique angle, I believe that it's a relatively acceptable relationship. They're Juliet balconies, and I feel on the distances there that it is an acceptable relationship. And obviously with the ground levels, although that's the highest point of there, it's not such a significant that I feel it would have an impact on privacy and overlooking of the garden area.
Just to confirm, so when you say Juliet balcony, so that's not a balcony that somebody can walk out onto, it's just a railing out the window essentially?
I think you can step out to it, but I think it's shown from the image there, the relationship there, that's not, in my view, an untypical relationship between adjacent properties and gardens due to the setback of the apartments and the oblique angle.
Is that okay?
I'm not quite sure that was the question. So
No.
Just in terms of the description of that balcony, to my understanding, a Juliet balcony is you have a full height window that's essentially like a door, but the railing is immediately in front of it. There's no balcony that you can exit onto. The image that in front of us at the minute, to me, looks like that is an actual occupiable external balcony from which obviously viewing angles would potentially be slightly more of a concern if a person can actually stand out on that balcony compared to it just being a window.
Through you, Chair, just correct, yes, you can stand out on it, but as you can see also, it's not a privacy screen because it's the gable-in wall on the side that I believe, although you can step onto that balcony, I believe that the relationship and angle of viewing is there. But you're quite correct, Councillor Smith, correction there, that you can stand out onto that balcony, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Virgo, please.
Could I, Chair, just go on with Councillor Smith's point? Because I'm confused. So if you stand on that balcony, what would I look at if I was in the top flat, if I physically went onto the balcony, please, Margaret?
Through you, Chair. I think it's clear from the plan on the plans that you would look out south, and yes, it is possible to look east, and it would be wrong to say that it would be impossible, but I don't believe it's that when you're standing there you'll be as clearly visible, and I don't believe that that's an abnormal relationship between the properties and the balcony and the garden area.
But just, I'm still not absolutely clear from this. If I stand on that, can I see the garden of pretty well on that top one of Woodland House pretty well?
Through you, Chair, I think it's clear that you would see the garden. Yes, you would look onto it at the rear point of it. Yes.
Right. Okay, that's great. Now I've got a few other questions, if I may, Madam Chairman. I'm still unclear, just to be absolutely sure about this to members, if I may ask through you, Margaret, to Andy Wells. when you said there are no exit, are we understanding there's a 6-foot fence? Because I don't quite understand it. Is that the projection on the plan?
Through you, Chair, I reiterate my previous response. There is no access between the development and Mushroom Castle.
I'd just like some details on it, Andy.
By any
Details of it.
By any mode of transport. The sole point of access is to Gardeners Road, and I understand through the case officer that details of boundary treatments and fencing are to be submitted by condition, but have not yet been done so.
Right, so we don't know at the moment. We're just saying that's what we'd like. Margaret, can I come back to you then? What would you insist, if that's the case, that there's no exit there, what would you insist that would stop pedestrians, as Councillor Hayes asked, walking down Mushroom Castle, please?
Through you, Chair, it's expected when the boundary treatment conditions comes in that there will be fences or walls in place that would prevent that. I think on the layout we have discussed with the applicant that we would expect the boundary treatment to prevent that access. And when the details come in, that's what we would be looking for. And it's reasonable to expect that to be shown on a condition. We do generally expect boundary treatments to come in for condition. And the concerns about access to Mushroom Castle have been made at the outline stage when it went back to committee the second time, when we discussed if any pedestrian route could be made other than Gardeners Road, and it's something that's been discussed as part of this application. So it is something we're aware of, that Mushroom Castle is not an adopted road, and it's not expected that it will be used as an access point for the new properties.
I understand, but we could ask for something solid ourselves, couldn't we, from the developer, and that would be a high fence.
Through you, Chair, that's what we would expect from boundary treatment. I mean, whether it's fencing or walls and the details are different, but if we expect boundary treatment, then yes, that is what we would expect.
Could I just ask about the levels, Madam Chairman? Sorry, I've got a few here. The levels, because I'm still a little confused about what I think I understand, certainly. Maybe Sheila understands it differently. But from the speaker, it would seem to me, because we've walked this field and it's very undulating, it is not level. And any builder would have to level this. Are we absolutely sure, Margaret, that in using the soil from across the site to level the site, the distance of the ridge heights would not increase?
Through you, Chair, there is a condition for details of levels to be submitted for approval, and obviously that is one of the points we'll be looking at. Would it abnormally increase the ground levels? And I think, as the speaker said, of course there need to be superficial level to put the slabs on site, but the intention of the levels condition is to make sure that there is no artificial increase in the levels of the site, and that has been covered at outline stage in a condition.
It certainly has in paperwork,
No,
but
no,
you
no,
see
we've-
my...
Tony,
No, I must, no,
Councillor
sorry, Chair,
Virgo,
no,
we
I have a supplementary, no,
visited this and revisited
No, I'm really
this.
sorry,
We've
Chair,
had-
I have a supplementary to that question. I'm sorry, but I must put it. Thank you, I'm sorry I'm not in the room, I apologise. You would agree, wouldn't you, Margaret, that this is what you would expect, but it may not happen in true life? And the only way we could do something about that, because I'm trying to cover this from the Woodland House point of view, would be to restrict the height of the roof. But it's very unlikely we could do that. Is that correct?
So you, Chair, when the details of the levels come in, it would include ground levels, and would expect to see the levels of the building. And
would we actually check that on site?
Well,
yes, why not?
Well, I'm asking. It's a question. It's a question, actually, Chairman.
Okay, to you, Chair, it's not an unusual condition to have. It's standard that we would put that levels conditions on to avoid artificial increases in levels of the ground. And as in all cases, if it's felt that the building was not built in accordance with the plan, we do have an enforcement team. It's not an unusual situation, and that's a standard condition to put on. Obviously, this is site sensitive, but all sites are sensitive in the sense of we want to make sure that things are built in accordance with plans.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Zaharuddin now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officer clarify how new condition 13 differs from the existing condition 4, please?
Sorry, Councillor, what was the condition number you referred to?
In the report, it's 4, and the new condition is 13 in the supplementary report. So it's related to no dwelling shall be occupied until details of boundary treatments have been submitted and approved by local planning authority.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And condition 13 in supplementary report as well.
Yeah, the condition was particularly applied to ensure that we are getting details in of boundary walls and fences, because there were some concerns, particularly of properties close to the access road, to be able to specify fences and walls. So, and we do want to see boundary treatments all across the site. So the condition was applied to specifically ask for boundary treatment to come in separately. I don't know if that answers your question, if I've gone off the point, Councillor.
Yeah, actually, I was looking for specific differences between those two, or is it intended to be same, or if there is any different, what's the difference?
I think the supplementary conditions are the newest conditions. If there's any conflict with conditions in the main report, so I have to review that.
Yeah, sure. In case
I
of,
think I'm duplicating actually, Councillor. I think when preparing the supplementary report, I think that's been added, but as you're right, it's no.
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I think the case officer is correct. I think the condition recommended on the supplementary report is perhaps more detailed, but I think there is an element of replication with the condition 4 on the agenda, and so that's something that if the application is approved, then we'd pick that up and amalgamate it and make it as strong as possible before we issue the decision. Thank you.
so for the record, condition 13 will be applicable more in case of confusion. So condition 13 will take precedence. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. Yes, that'd be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I do want to ask about biodiversity net gain. Obviously, quite a lot of the objectors' comments surround that, and they've made various assertions as regards to the accuracy of the ecological reports that have been submitted. I was just wondering if the officer can explain, in terms of the overall process of securing BNG on the site, can we just get clarity as to where we're at? Like, are there conditions that are still to be discharged? Are there further submissions that are going to be assessed, or is this kind of it at this point?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, the Councillor is correct that there is a condition on the outline consent for details BNG to be submitted and approved. As part of the outline application, the 106 did secure the basis of this, but a condition was added so that further details could be submitted for approval. So BNG has been taken into account at the outline stage, even though BNG was not mandatory at the time, but there is a condition now for the precise details of that BNG to be submitted for approval, together with the contributions which will be required towards off-site biodiversity.
Supplementary?
Yes, I see. The first is just with regards to the timing of that. I presume that's a pre-commencement condition.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I believe it is.
Yes. Okay, and then with regards to the claims that have been made by the objectors with regards to the sort of accuracy of the ecological reports, I presume when the officers review submissions at that point, that would be something that would be considered in terms of the validity of the evidence at that stage.
To you, Chair, yes, that's correct. And as part of this application, we did receive updated ecological information, and the first speaker did refer to wildlife on the site, which yes, we are aware of, and that is referred to in the ecological assessment and in the SEMP and LEMP to be secured as part of the application. We're well aware of the wildlife that visits the site. We have secured through the LEMP and the SEMP protection and mitigation enhancement for our protected species. They have been a significant factor in determination of the application, and we do make reference to protected species of badgers, bats, hedgehogs, invertebrates and birds. So it's not the case that we haven't considered our legal position. We have done, which is why we've secured those documents, and our biodiversity officer is satisfied that the ecological assessment is up to date, and then when we get these details of the B&G in, we will have a further plan in then. So it has been a significant factor in the termination of the application.
Thank you very much. May I? Oh, yes, Councillor Collins.
Hopefully this hasn't really been covered. I know that there will be protection measures in place for the poplar trees, and obviously 12 of them are beyond the site boundary. One of them is included. But I've seen it raised, has there been any consideration by the applicant of the fact that those poplar trees may impact the development in terms of their invasive roots and also their propensity to fall unsuspectingly?
Through you, Chair, if
Yes.
that's okay.
Thank you.
Stephen Chown, I'm the Head of Natural Estates. I'm here this evening to cover the tree element, so I will pick up those points. It relates in part to a question raised earlier by Councillor Smith, asking about the factual correctness of some of the information that was presented. I think there may have been an error in the way that the poplar trees were described earlier, which was as not being protected. In fact, the trees are protected. That line of poplar trees are included within TPO 1265. That has the title of land to the west side of Whitegates and Collingwood Mushroom Castle. It covers those trees in a group. The reason that the trees are protected is that they are off-site assets, which the developer must have the assumption that they will retain. So that distinction is not crucial to the sort of material decision before everyone tonight, because the trees have been treated by the application as to be retained. The question of the level of detail that's been given to the future impact of the trees, there is a tree report with the application. The level of scrutiny that the report has received so far is pertinent only to the layout, essentially, which looks at whether the trees have been buffered appropriately. I think it's fair to say that this is a constrained site by trees, so the developer has been juggling the pressure of the development needing to move up against trees in all the areas. The pressure that the poplar trees will be under from the change that would come from the new use of the land on the other side of the boundary is a factor, but at the same time the British standard only makes certain requirements on what would reasonably be considered and what would be a material constraint. So there would be different ways to approach the protection of those trees and to ensure that the development factored it in. When we reviewed the layout, were satisfied that there had been reasonable steps taken to do what could be done to create a sustainable relationship for the future. But as with most and many developments in a borough as treed as Bracknell, there will always be conflicts with the trees, and the species of poplar is not ideal to have alongside a development, but that is the trees that were there at the start. That's the trees that were protected by the TPO to make sure they could be considered. And that, I think, is as much reassurance as can be provided that the species does not create any additional burdens over and above what would apply to a tree generally, in terms of what would be required for reasonable management.
You have a supplementary?
Thank you. So what you're saying is there's no further consideration that the developer would have to legally undertake for the protection of the new residents?
I think in terms of the consideration that the developer would need to have, there are still considerations for how those properties are designed and constructed to make sure that they're not vulnerable to heave or subsidence in the future. So the foundation design would need to be sufficient. It would need to be appropriate for the soil conditions in that location, and it would need proper technical solutions to ensure that. It would also mean that the developer would be selling a house that had a line of trees behind it at the point of sale. The presence of those trees, the presence of the TPO won't be unknown to the people who will be looking at and buying those houses. So in terms of what's reasonable for the developer to take into account, they have taken reasonable steps.
Thank you. Can you speak to us about the oak trees that are retained on site, please? Go ahead.
I just want to clarify. So you say that the trees have to be retained and they have TPOs, but aren't these the trees owned by other people? Yes. And could they not be taken out, and therefore what we're stating here is incorrect? Because they're owned by other people, not... Yes. This is what it's saying in here. If just so we're clear.
Can we ask the officer to respond, please?
Thank you.
On the question of ownership, yes, the trees are outside the development site. Certainly many of the poplar trees are outside the development site. And the TPO would not unreasonably prevent the removal of trees. If the owner of those trees wanted to make an application to remove them, they're entirely entitled to. So yeah, that's their opportunity should they wish. But from the point of view of the developer, they have needed to design on the basis that those trees will be retained and do what they reasonably can to allow space for those trees to be retained should the off-site owner wish to retain those trees.
Thank you. Okay. Can I just ask about the oak trees, please? Because there was concern about the roots and so on of the oak tree in the middle and the one on the entrance road.
Through you, Chair, so is that a question about the viability of the retention of those trees within the design? So again, the design has taken reasonable steps to try to adjust the design to leave the significant oak tree that is a prominent feature in the middle of the site currently as a feature of the finished site post-development, and they have created a green area to the west of the site as part of that, which I understand is proposed for tree planting. As I said earlier, in terms of the pressure that the introduction of the houses brings, then that tree has been a material constraint, and it is pushed as far as it can reasonably be pushed to allow the development to fit within the site. But in terms of the following of the British standard and trying to make sure that the tree is given reasonable space to thrive in the future, then the tree service view is that the application has done that and that there isn't a tree reason for refusal on the site.
That's great, thank you. Councillor Zaharuddin?
Thank you, Chair. I guess my colleague Councillor Virgo was before me, but I hope he doesn't mind. Paragraph 9.18 says the submitted planting and maintenance details are acceptable. And then condition 14 requires a further detailed tree planting scheme and 5-year maintenance plan. So my question is, can the officer explain what additional protection condition 14 provides?
Thank you. So you, Chair. Yes, I mean, The condition 14 was added at request really because I think following the site visit, the request was made for additional tree planting to be provided where possible. The initially, as said, the landscaping plan was considered to be acceptable by our landscape officer, and she still believes that's the case. However, after approach was made by members that tree planting would be desirable if possible, the applicant was happy to accept a condition for details of additional tree planting to be provided to supplement landscaping already submitted. So it's additional planting required, but as set out in the report, our landscape officer was happy with the proposals. It's just this is, if you like, a bonus in the sense of if we can get more on-street trees, we felt that was an acceptable thing to try and achieve.
Yep. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry. Did you put your hand up before?
Yeah.
No.
Well, no. But
Councillor Smith, then Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the affordable housing within the development, particularly really within relation to the apartment building. My previous concerns, and it's some of my concerns, are really around the character of that particularly large building. I understand that building is entirely affordable units from the officer reports. Please correct me if that's wrong. I'm just wondering, within, so I guess it's a bit of a hypothetical, but within your experience of these kind of sites, how necessary is it for there to be that type of building in order to deliver the affordable housing requirement, or would you foresee that it would be possible to achieve that with a building that doesn't have the same sort of character impact?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, that's always a difficult one, of course, isn't it? Because as you can see from the report on the mix, that the apartments are intended to be affordable, and we had initially hoped to achieve more larger family houses as affordable. And I know our housing officer was in negotiations with the applicant. A provider had been found that was happy to provide this level of affordable housing, because one of the difficulties that I'm sure members are aware of is actually securing affordable housing through Section 106 agreements and finding a provider that will actually provide that scheme. So this is a scheme that the applicant said that they did have a provider in mind, and this is a mix that they felt would actually be secured. Affordable housing was secured through the Section 106 agreement, with the tenure agreement to be submitted later, and this submits that. In the mind of the applicant and our housing officer at the time, who left the authority now, this was an appropriate means of securing an affordable housing scheme that actually would come forward instead of being lost and then retrospectively turning into contributions for schemes elsewhere, which unfortunately can happen. I hope that answers the question, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayes, then Councillor
Well,
Virgo.
it answered quite a bit of mine, what I was going to ask. Because again, looking at the site, knowing the area, my concern was, is the design element of a building inappropriately not the same as what's surrounding it. And as you're saying, it's to get affordable housing, but it does concern me about the aspect of the area. And also, when you look at apartments or flats or whatever you want to call it, and because we haven't got the design element yet, it is the waste management. And I don't mean the waste of the drains.
Is this going to be a question?
Yes.
Councillor
And
Hayes?
do you think that this building will be able to be accommodated because of the size of it at this point in time, and when the design element of when waste is considered and all the parking that will be required, that it would not have been appropriate to be in houses rather than, unfortunately, apartments?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I hope I've got the gist of it. There is, of course, a condition on the outline permission for bin storage and waste management to come forward, and also our waste manager was happy that the lorries can serve the site.
Yes, it wasn't in the report.
Apologies for that. And she was happy with that vehicles can enter the site. and that accommodation could be made for the bin storage for the houses and the apartments, even with the growing requirements for various bins in the future. So that there has been that consultation, and I don't believe there are any issues of the refuse vehicles being able to enter the site or turn the site, and that can be done within the site, so there's no need for turning circles and access outside the site, unless a highways officer wants to correct me.
Thank you very much. You're right. That's okay.
Through you, Chair. No, the refuse vehicle can turn on site. There's sufficient space and swept paths are included in the transport reports, and the parking meets the council's parking standards requirements.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Virgo, do you have a question?
Yeah, a couple actually, please. Just a matter of interest, Margaret, I did ask for, and members would be interested in this, to see the biodiversity sheet, and I was never given it. Is there a problem with giving members that so they can scrutinise it?
Through you, Chair, I know made a request to look at the landscape environmental management plan, which I believe I passed to you, but the biodiversity documents are all on the file, so they are available for people to see, and I thought I had passed you all the documents that you'd requested.
Don't
so
remember, and it's no, my fault. And I would like to say thank you to you for pushing through more trees in the streets, because I think that's a really brilliant idea. And in terms of screening, Councillor Smith asked about this, but there is no screening as such, is there? Apart from just hoping the trees grow, really.
I'm not sure in what sense, in the sense of there are conditions for boundary treatment, there's landscaping provided. It's not considered necessary to screen the site from view, and obviously I think the relationships to adjacent properties and privacy are maintained by the distances and the lack of windows on side elevations. So I'm not sure what screening the landscape.
I suppose what I was really trying to say was there's nothing to break up the bulk of that building, which sits rather differently to the surrounding houses.
It's true it does, but whether or not it needs that, or if the design is attractive in its own right and is set on the lowest part of the site, and I'm sure when members visited the site they could see the difference in levels as you walk up Mushroom Castle, that it's screened in the sense by existing planting outside the site and by ground levels. So I don't believe the building needs to be screened from view, because I believe the design is acceptable in its own right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Collins.
I've got one more. Hedgehogs. Is there I noticed you mentioned that there will be hedgehog holes in all the boundaries, and presumably between gardens. Is there anything that can be done to protect the hedgehogs when construction starts? Is there any requirement that the developer does that?
Through you, Chair, there is a biodiversity construction management plan that will be approved, and there is a landscape management plan, and we will also be getting a construction management plan that will cover all stages. And biodiversity is a factor that we would expect to be covered in those, because obviously demolition and construction stage is a sensitive stage for wildlife, that you want to protect them from harm, but you don't want to box any wildlife in the site when that starts. So that is something that has been looked at, and our biodiversity officer is happy with those proposals.
And that is something, it doesn't matter whether it's, I had a quick look, where it's listed as Schedule 6 on the Wildlife and Countryside Act, which was in one of the objections, but from what I could see, it needed really to be moved to a different schedule. Can we put an informative on the planning application just to remind the developer that there are hedgehogs on site if they haven't already been identified?
To you, Chair, no issue at all with the informative. As you said, hedgehogs, they slip between either the Schedule 5 and Schedule 6, but obviously still protected, and there's something that we do take account of. But there's absolutely no harm at all in having informatives advising that, you know, it's almost a watching brief, isn't it, before, as we have the ones for bird nesting season to have someone to have checked trees before any trees are felled. I don't see any harm in an informative to remind them, and also that it could be covered and should be covered in the submitted construction management plan as an extra safeguard.
That's great, thank you. I think we've had quite enough questions now. I think we've wrung it all out. So I would like to propose the recommendation, which is on page, forgotten, where's my glasses? Page 29 of the agenda pack, and with additional conditions on page 3 of the
Checking no deviations of conditions, condition 4, that's informative, RE hedgehogs.
on the supplementary report. Are they all?
What's been added here, yeah.
And
Do you want to read it?
yes, thank you. And we have added about checking no duplication of conditions, condition 4, plus an informative about hedgehogs. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Collins, thank you very much. Would you like to have a quick debate about this? Who would like to speak, please? He hasn't got his hand up. Who? Councillor Smith.
I'll go first then, Chair. It's a genuinely difficult application, this, and I'm incredibly sympathetic to the adjacent residents. There are frustratingly certain things that the planning system doesn't really give regard to. You purchase a property on the edge of the development, you look out your windows across this lovely field, this lovely natural area, you've got all this wildlife coming into your garden, and you would like for that to be protected, and I absolutely sympathise with anyone in that situation. The idea that suddenly that field is going to turn into a housing development, and that whole context of your property is going to change. I think I fully appreciate just how distressing and frustrating that is. But our role on this committee is it's a quasi-judicial role. It's a regulatory role and the NPPF sets the context for that. And unfortunately, the NPPF doesn't protect your position on the edge of the settlement in that way. It doesn't protect the view from your property. It doesn't protect the value of your property. You can have some arguments with your member of parliament about whether or not it should. Please do so. But we have to decide within the context that we have. And sometimes that we do have to make decisions on this committee which can feel incredibly unrewarding because there's no way to satisfy everybody. Coming to the sort of position, my position on this, I am genuinely torn. I think there's a few areas of this which still concern me. The one actually which I'm more comfortable with at the end of this evening's discussion is the biodiversity concerns. A lot of the objections have specifically lent into that. There have been certain claims around the accuracy of information. There have been certain claims about legally what should and shouldn't be considered. I think the important point is that the officer has confirmed that there is a condition on the outline application which still needs to be discharged pre-commencement with regards to the final proposals for biodiversity net gain, and that all of that submitted information is going to be further reviewed when that submission comes in. And regardless of our decision this evening, my understanding is that development can't commence until that condition's been discharged. So on that matter, this decision tonight is not the final word. That's still to be covered. I think I would like to request, just as a note, Chair, that given the significant concern around that, when that condition comes to discharge, I think it probably should come back to committee, and it should be dealt with in this forum. My two other concerns here, the first is with regards to the balcony, and it does feel to me that there's an extent of overlooking there. You know, your view of angle when you're sat on a balcony is somewhat different to, you know, out of a window, and I am slightly concerned by that. I think it's a borderline issue, and, you know, could we make a case to refuse based upon that? I don't know. You know, the officer advice obviously is that the planning officers consider that acceptable. They're far more experienced in judging that than I am. I am still concerned about the massing of the apartment building. I very much respect that further to our discussions at the last planning committee, the applicant has, you know, made a reasonably significant reduction to the height of the building, and it is now more sympathetic. It is still a bigger building. It's not taller in terms of absolute height, but obviously it's built from a lower height and therefore does still have a somewhat more imposing nature. I think that's got to be weighed against the affordable housing considerations. You know, part of these larger developments is that, you know, we desperately need more affordable housing in the borough, and I think we've got to be reasonable in understanding the sort of the planning balance involved in delivering that. You know, I think if this were not entirely affordable housing, I would definitely have stronger objections to that element. But I think in that light, you know, there's definitely a planning balance case. I'm still not sure I'm decided yet, so I'll let my other colleagues speak before I make my mind up at the end of the debate.
Thank you for all that. Councillor Hayes.
You said quite a bit for us. Because, as you know, knowing the area, my concern is the character of it. And yes, it's nice to think that there are the trees there now, but we're aware of the fact that 12 of the trees do not come under the jurisdiction of the developer. And my concern is, yes, we do need houses for our young people to be able to afford in some of our nice areas, but it's the fact they're flat, they're apartments. I would prefer it if the design could have been, had it been possible, with regards to finance and all the rest of it, and that they were houses, not apartments in that area. I think the bulk and the look does not fit in with the area, but I'll go with other person's views.
Tina Mackenzie-Boyle, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I am sympathetic towards both of my colleagues and what they've said. I mean, for me, I'm afraid the harm is aesthetics. You've got this block of flats. One level lower, we could have had some nice masonettes, possibly, which still could have been on the affordable scale, shall we say. But the affordable scale is rather up and down, isn't it? So I would still like to hear, I mean, unfortunately, I can't vote. However, I would still like to hear what my other colleagues, other than Councillor Hayes and Councillor Smith, have got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penfold.
Right. I agree that it is a very difficult decision. I do not live in that particular area, and it has not struck me how out of character it probably is. But then there are many estates in Batnall and other places which have estates which are not very in character. I think the developer and the planning committee have talked about various changes which I think have made it slightly more acceptable. The ecology plan, which I read fairly thoroughly, providing it is followed carefully and reported on regularly, could work, and I hope would work. On balance, I would vote for this.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Virgo, please.
So I was trying to find the microphone. I think it's a balance, and I think, you know, previous speakers have said it really. The one thing I would say is that I think we've given this a lot of thought, and I thank the officers and the members really, because I think that's what this planning committee should do, and it has done actually, and we've been through every single thing we can think of, and it is a balance. I mean, of course we need more houses. I'm slightly in agreement with Tina Mackenzie-Boyle. I mean, I think if it would have been masonettes, I think it would have been a simple matter to say, well, you know, it looks fairly good. But I think because of the bulk of this building and the size, and I've made this point many times, but I'm still, to be honest, apprehensive about the fact it will be lower. I don't think it will, but that's my opinion. And there's very little we can do about that, to be honest, in the end. So, you know, there are things about this which are not really in keeping with Chavey Down, and you know, the previous speaker spoke about, well, there's like this in Bracknell, but the point about Bracknell, it's a series of villages as well, and the character of those villages, I think, are very important to keep for our future generations. And to be honest, I am very concerned about the banisters, the balconies. I don't think they're brilliant. I don't think the design is that great. It's my opinion. I do think it isn't right. Nobody's right to have a view. That's absolutely right in planning, unfortunately. But on the other hand, if someone is standing on a banister and you can look into your garden and you know look at it from a point, I think that is unreasonable. So for all those points, my feeling would be to refuse it and hope that a developer comes back with something like masonettes, as Tina Mackenzie-Boyle said, which are more in keeping, and I think then we would accept it. Thank you, Mr. Phil.
Thank you, Councillor Virgo. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. We've already heard the site was allocated for 40 homes in the Bracknell Forest local plan, which makes it very difficult for us to change that. And the outline plan was approved. Winkfield Parish Council, strangely, did not object to this application, which did surprise me. The apartment block has been reduced in height, and I believe that if it's built differently to what is on the plans, we will have a case for planning enforcement to ensure that it is built to plans. The roof is hipped away from Woodland House, which helps. I do share the concerns about the balconies, which we hadn't really discussed last time. It's large. The biodiversity net gain of 10% on-site and across-site and off-site, I'm actually quite confident it will be delivered, and I think we will protect the wildlife as much as we can, and the fact that there is adjacent green space in the form of a sang means that they do have the wildlife does have other places on which to roam, and that will be protected for, I believe, 100 years. The affordable housing provision, I said last time, and I still say is good. And so, in balance, I will be voting to approve this application.
Thank you. Councillor Templeton.
With great concern for both sides and the unbalance residents, I will be voting for this. Affordable homes are difficult to get anybody to build. We will go for and affordable homes, social rents are not easily acceptable by anybody to build, and they are the ones that are enabling our young people to actually have a home. So I think with the biodiversity, it worried me a lot, but I think that's been sorted. We can enforce right the way across this, and I think we would be enforcing this to make sure that we follow this through, because it does have concern for many of us, and it is a large block. But I think if that large block can afford affordable housing, then there is no way I could refuse it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Then I would like...
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to say my little piece. We've heard about the size, the character of styles. I'm pleased that the density of this new development is not as it's not as dense as the nearby housing estate. And within the Mushroom Castle area, there are lots of different styles. I don't think we can say it doesn't match a style. It's got its own style in this little development. I think that's really important. I'm no longer concerned about the big block because it is lower and enforceable, but also the fact that the roof does slope away from its neighbour is a huge improvement, and it doesn't look half as overbearing. I have to say, concerned about the balcony situation right next to, or it's not right next to, it's a few yards away from the garden fence of the next door neighbour. And if the developer was to come forward with a change to that, I would welcome it like mad. But yeah, and the biodiversity, when I moved into my house years ago, 91, it was before Quelm Park was built, and we had badgers, we had foxes, and as Quelm Park was built, the badgers disappeared. I believe they're still in the wood down the way a bit, but our foxes still come to visit and they dig their way under the fence. I have to say I'm concerned about people moving in there and not expecting to have wildlife in their gardens. It reminds me of people who move in next door to farms and then complain about the cockerels or the smell of the cows or whatever. And I'm thinking that we ought to educate people a bit more about that sort of thing. But I think this is, by and large, a very good development. And apart from the balcony situation, I will definitely be voting for it, especially with the affordable housing in there too.
Very quickly, as long as people understand that it is brought back, listening to yourselves, that there would be in the majority again for it, then the condition to bringing it back to committee for us to verify all that's there, I do think that should be put into the papers. Very much so.
Thank you. Right, better take a vote. Or is there somebody?
Through you, Chair. Before we take the vote, I just want to make it clear to members of the public here and members and members of the public online that although Councillor Zarindin and Councillor Virgo and Mackenzie Boyle are online, they cannot vote. So it's only people in the room that can vote. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Sorry, I'd forgotten to remind us of that. Okay. So those in favour of the recommendation as amended, As we said before, please show.
That's 7 in favour.
Those against? Those, do you abstain?
Because I'm going to make sure that the conditions and the future design of it is there, and that
Okay, so you're abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, so therefore the motion is carried as amended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much for your patience there. If you'd like to disappear, now is the moment. Thank you.
Do you want a cake?
Oh yeah, sorry, comfort break, yeah. You can 5-minute break, please.
Ask for a construction plan for the neighbours, but can you see if that could be done, please?
Construction plan.
In terms of where the lorries are. That be conferred with the councillors as well?
Yeah.
Chair.
Hang on,
Chair,
Margaret is just going to say, hang on.
May I remind you? Chair, may I remind you, I did ask the developer if there was going to be a construction management plan.
I think that's part of normal operation.
There's already a condition on the outline permission for one to be submitted with
Settled. Tina? We're just about to go online.
We are online.
We're online.
Yes.
Okay. Tina Mackenzie Boyle.
Present.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much.
Let me just check, Tony.
Is Tony still there? And Councillor Zahuruddin as well?
Yes, Chair, I'm there. Thank you.
Lovely.
Councillor Zahuruddin.
I'm still here.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, let's go on to item 6, the land adjacent to Silver Trees, Birch Lane. And I believe that's Shelley.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good
Wait,
evening. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, let's do here from the beginning. So my name is Shelley Clark and I'm the case officer for this application. The proposal is for a new 3-bedroom self-build dwelling in Birch Lane in Ascot. So officers here are recommending that the application be refused. However, the application has been called to committee at the request of Councillor Virgo. To begin with, I'm going to show some photographs before I start my presentation. So here we can see Birch Lane and the surrounding area. Oh dear, why is that not working? Why is it frozen? What if we do escape? Oh, thank you. So we saw an aerial view showing Birch Lane and the surrounding area, and now we have an aerial view of the application site with neighbouring properties, Silver Trees to the left and Sunrise to the right. So these are photos showing Birch Lane both ways, with the property Orchard Manor opposite the application site and properties further down Birch Lane. Okay. So here we can see a photograph of the application site and the access from Birch Lane. So here we can see the proposed driveway and the location of the house and the parking area. So amended plans since the submission of the original application now show a more holistic site layout with the proposed dwelling, driveway and parking areas shown in the context of the tree constraints and tree protection measures, with the drawing showing further details of utilities and services, including proposed drainage arrangements. The plan shows access from Birch Lane and parking for 2 cars in accordance with the Council's parking standards for a 3-bedroom property. Further details of cycle storage and refuse provision would need to be secured by condition. And here we can see the proposed elevations and floor plans. So here the proposed elevations show the dwelling to be single-storey and to have a more contemporary design with materials being using wood cladding to blend into the landscape and areas of glazing to maximise daylight and sunlight. Just see here. And then we have the floor plan where more principal rooms, excuse me, such as the lounge, dining area, are oriented towards the southwest-southeast of the site to again maximise levels of daylight and sunlight. So the entire site is covered by a woodland tree preservation order. This is 1263, supplemented by an older area TPO 606 with another woodland TPO covering land directly to the rear of the site, so which collectively confirm the site's importance to the woodland setting of the area. The Character Area Assessments SPD states that the area has a positive character, mainly due to its woodland setting. Existing tree cover should be retained and mature trees protected. So with regards to the planning history of the site, this application follows a previously refused application, reference 19/00862 FUL, an appeal dated September 2021 for a single dwelling on this site, where the inspector considered that existing views into the site are of a mixed type and size of vegetation growing on it. This unmanaged and natural appearance provides a connection with the larger area of woodland beyond it. That, along with the appeal site itself, is subject to tree preservation orders. At present, the site contributes positively to the enclosed dense canopy and woodland setting of the area identified in the SPD. And here we have the previous site layout for the 2019 application. So the 2019 application follows a previous application, reference 18/00224 FUL, an appeal dated May 2019 for a 4-bedroom dwelling, where the inspector considered that the proposed development would fundamentally conflict with the established character and appearance of the unmanaged woodland covering the site, harming both its integrity and the contribution that this makes to the character and appearance of the area at large. The inspector also considered that a woodland TPO recognises that all trees within a designated area make a collective contribution to the value of the woodland of which they form part. The tree service considers that there is a high likelihood that trees would be harmed and that the development as proposed would have long-term implications through the fragmentation of the woodland and sterilisation from future generation. However, I will let my colleague Stephen Chown speak about that after my presentation. So the loss of the woodland is contrary to Bracknell Forest Local Plan Policy LP30, which is a strategic policy which protects against the loss of green infrastructure. And obviously the loss of woodland goes against the council motion passed last night. So the officer's recommendation is in line with the motion which raises the issue of the loss of green infrastructure, woodland, through the incremental loss of, like I say, green infrastructure, woodland on small sites. So here, further arboricultural information and details of services have been submitted following the submission of the application. With regards to water supply, a pipe will be laid at current ground level under the new access drive. There will be no gas supply, and the incoming electrical supply will be from overhead cables. Details of drainage arrangements have also been submitted, and my colleague Efwa Finn will speak further about these after my presentation. Similarly, actually, I'm just going to say that the supplementary report provides details of additional information since the publication of the committee report. So here the applicant has confirmed that the proposed surface water maintenance strategy comprises rainwater harvesting tanks suspended beneath the building, with overflow directed to infiltration boreholes located beneath the tanks. But again, my colleague Efwa Finn will talk more about these. So the site is located outside the settlement boundary and within the countryside. As a new dwelling, which will be located in the countryside, it would be contrary to policies LP2 and LP35 of the Bracknell Forest Local Plan, as it does not require a countryside location, meet an essential local rural need, or support rural diversification. The council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. As such, the tilted balance is engaged as set out in paragraph 11D of the MPPF, and planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of the proposal or harm significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The proposed development would result in the provision of one additional dwelling, which is a recognised benefit, along with benefits in terms of the provision of a unit of self-build housing, again with associated economic benefits. And it also represents an efficient use of land in a moderately sustainable location. However, in this instance, based on its planning merits, officers consider that the proposal would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the acknowledged benefits due to the significant harm to the long-term character and appearance of the area and woodland. Although new properties have recently been built along Perch Lane, as shown in the photographs, these properties have been built on what was considered at that time to be previously developed land. The difference between other sites and this site is that this site hasn't been previously developed and retains its woodland character. This application should be considered in relation to its own history, on its own planning merits, and in its current state. Having therefore considered the application on its own merits, officers have now recommended that the application be refused on the grounds that the proposal would introduce a new dwelling, engineered access, services and domestic land use into a woodland landscape. Long-term woodland fragmentation and sterilisation would fundamentally harm the woodland character and setting of the area. There are three further holding reasons for refusal, these relating to the lack of SBA mitigation contributions towards community facilities and open space of public value capable of serving the site, and to ensure that the dwelling remains a self-build, custom-build dwelling. However, these reasons for refusal could be overcome through the submission of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague, Efwa Finn, who will talk about the drainage arrangements.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Shirley. I'll share my screen now.
Thanks, Efwa.
So in terms of the drainage strategy, I'll give a little bit of background into the site opportunities and constraints. So the geology of the site is backshot formation, which is highly permeable, so it can support infiltration of runoff into the ground. On the right of the screen is a screenshot of Thames Water assets, and with the development site north of Long Hill Road, the only existing sewer is a foul water sewer along Long Hill Road. There is no surface water sewer in the vicinity of the site. So this means that for a connection to be made into the foul water asset, it has to travel 140 meters onto Long Hill Road, and that is not a practical option for the application. So in this instance, infiltration into the ground remains the only viable option for the disposal of surface water and foul water drainage. So this was touched on briefly by Shirley. In terms of the surface water drainage strategy, rainwater harvesting system has been proposed by the applicant, which in my opinion is quite innovative because it will reuse the rainwater instead of discharging it. So the proposal is for 2 tanks to be suspended beneath the undercroft of the slabs. So as you can see, the building is suspended on slabs, so it leaves a void underneath the building, and that is the opportunity that the developer is used to position the rainwater harvesting tanks. So this is just an illustration of how we envisage it to look like. The details will have to be submitted, but as you can see, tanks will be suspended under the building, and then any overflow will go into boreholes. From LLFA perspective, we have no objection to this proposal. Proposal for foul water disposal. So as already said, due to the proximity of or due to the proximity of our water sewer in the vicinity, infiltration is the only viable option. And I have to emphasize that the EA are the regulatory body for discharge into ground, and LLFA only provides an advisory role to our planning officers and the case officer. So just to give a little bit of background into the discharge into ground regulation, there is the EA general binding rules for small sewage discharge into ground. So long as the conditions stipulated in the rules are met, a permit is not required. What are some of the rules or some of the provisions? So to start with, the discharge volume has to be limited to 2 cubic meters or less per day, and it's only for small discharge of domestic sewer, which is, so definitely the application site meets this proposal. To meet the binding rules, you have to use the correct treatment system. So it's either a septic tank or a small treatment plant to British standards. And discharge from the treatment system has to go through a drainage field. So basically what that means is it's a series of pipes that is dug quite close to the surface in trenches and backfilled with granular material. So the whole idea is to protect groundwater from contamination. And the arrangement gives opportunity for the water to trickle out of the perforated pipes and for it to be further treated through the soil before it actually hits wherever the groundwater is. So it's quite important to note that for a permit not to be required or for the EA binding rules to be met, you have to discharge into a drainage field. It's important to highlight that you cannot meet the binding rules if you are using a well or borehole or a soakaway that was installed after December 2007. And the reason for this is that these systems, wells, boreholes, and soakaways, they are installed quite deep into the ground, so it does not provide the opportunity for the water to trickle slowly for further treatment before it discharges into groundwater, reducing or increasing the potential for groundwater contamination. For the application side, 2 options have been proposed by the applicant. So option 1 and option 2, they are all very similar. The only difference is the final point of discharge. So in both options, treatment plants will be used, which is quite good. It ticks that box. The first option is to discharge into a drainage field. But in this instance, to reduce the impact on trees, the applicant is proposing to use a proprietary product. In the second option, they'll be discharging into borehole. And quite clearly, I'll come to it. The second option will not meet the binding rules because discharge into soakaway or borehole does not meet the criteria. So for option 1, this is the drawing that we've got from the applicant. The ball-like structure that you can see here is a treatment plant, and then it will be carried along pipes on the surface or very close to the surface to reduce the impact on trees along the side boundary. And then it discharges into the drainage field, which I've already said is going to be a proprietary product to reduce the impact on trees. So this is an illustration of how it looks like. You have your treatment plant here, albeit the pipe will be longer, but then it will effectively go into this infiltration tunnel, which is a proprietary product. So you're looking at, in this instance, I would presume a series of these infiltration tunnels. For a typical 3-bedroom, the applicant has stipulated a 2.5 meter by 2.5 meter excavation. LLFA is not able to confirm this because, as I've said, or the sufficiency of this, because as I've said, we are not the regulatory authority. We are only providing advice to our officers. From my assessment of option 1, I think it is viable. However, because a proprietary product is being used as opposed to the traditional infiltration trenches, I would advise that an EA permit is required or confirmation or some kind of consultation is undertaken with the EA to ensure that the regulations are met to prevent any enforcement actions in the future. And any proposal shall be to the satisfaction of the tree officer in order to assess that impact on trees is acceptable. I mentioned this briefly that with option 2, which is discharge into the borehole or soakaway, the the rules clearly stipulate that you cannot meet the general binding rules if you are discharging into a borehole or soakaway. So with option 2, my advice is that it will not meet the binding rules, and for it to go ahead, the applicant will have to apply for an EA permit, which could or could not be granted depending on the response from the EA. I must point to something that was submitted by the applicant for the foul water disposal mechanism for the adjoining or adjacent neighboring properties, Spinney Lodge. For Spinney Lodge, I think probably will bring that up to illustrate it a little bit better. So Spinney Lodge obtained a environmental permit from the Environment Agency for discharge into a ring soakaway. It is worth mentioning that this was a replacement of a failed septic tank and soakaway. So it's not a new system, it's a replacement of an existing one. They were replacing the septic tank with a more suited or a system that treats the water better, which is a sewage treatment plant, albeit it was discharging into a soakaway. But in this instance, they were replacing something that was failed. So the EA said in their response that they had taken into account all relevant considerations and legal requirements to come to that conclusion. I will not be able to make any comment, or I wouldn't want to prejudice what has been proposed by the applicant with respect to option 2. But all that the advice that I can give is that they have to get consent from the EA. And that is the advice I've given to our planning officer. In terms of the impacts of trees on what has been proposed, because the whole site is in TPO with trees all over the site, there is always going to be root ingress, because roots will always find the least resistant area to water. And I think our tree officer will talk more about this. So in conclusion, whatever is excavated and put into the ground in that site will need a lot of maintenance requirement compared to any other area or areas which doesn't have all these constraints. This information, I don't think I've seen evidence that it has been considered in the submission about how or the impacts of trees on the drainage infrastructure and how it will be maintained in the short and long term. So in conclusion, this is a site which is viable for infiltration. I must say, if it wasn't for the tree constraints, it would have been a very straightforward site with minimal issues from LLFA perspective. I have put in recommendations to say that on flood risk and drainage grounds, I honestly don't have any issues with the proposal. It is the issue remains with the trees on the site. So my advice is that any proposal will have to get EA approval, and the final scheme needs to be approved by the tree officer. I'll hand back to you, Shirley.
Thanks, Efwa.
Thank you, Efwa. I believe Stephen is now going to obviously talk about the impact on the trees and the woodland. Okay.
Thank you, Shelley. Yes, Stephen Chown, Head of Natural Estates, talking on trees at this meeting. I'm very grateful to Efwa for the clarity on those matters that has been provided. I'm certainly not a drainage expert, and I can only speak for how trees function, and it's safe to say that tree roots and drainage infrastructure are not naturally compatible. They're not happy collaborators. The drainage field wishes that water to escape. That is its purpose. It's looking to get it out into the soil. The tree roots are self-optimizing. They are looking to continually seek out and exploit any sources of water or oxygen or nutrients within the soil. And they will naturally, within a woodland environment of this site, they will seek out that water. And the tips of a tree root are very, very fine. They are capable of making their way through very small gaps, and then at the point they're through, they're able to increase the width of their root with incremental and annual growth, which will gradually widen any problems with drainage infrastructure generally. In this instance, whilst I accept there will be things I am sure that the technical teams will be able to do to try to minimise and slow down the passage of those routes, there is a fear that I have that in time the infrastructure that's put in place will cause a decline in its function, and it might accelerate the need for it to be replaced. I think, as I might well pick up later, I have a desire to give the committee and to give the decision-making process clarity, and part of the challenge is that we just don't have the clarity at the moment as to exactly what the drainage solution will look like. And that is a challenge with this application because it would need to be balanced against the benefits to understand what the impact on the woodland would be. I think that's it on the drainage front. I can talk more widely on trees if appropriate, or did you have more of your presentation to do before I come back in?
No, actually, Stephen, if you want to carry on.
Okay, lovely. So it was suggested that given the value and the importance of trees on the site, that maybe I should contribute something to the presentation to assist members to explain a little bit of the tree service position in relation to the recommendation we have of a refusal on woodland grounds. I wanted to clarify this recommendation is not definitive in any way on whether or not a house should be built here. That is clearly a wider planning judgment which will balance other considerations, of which the impact on trees and woodland is only one part. I also wanted to clarify it's not a question of whether a house can technically be constructed here. With sufficient engineering and specialist design, there will often be ways, there will be ways in this instance to construct development in constrained locations, and that equally is not a test that the tree service have been able to apply or consider. But the tree service position is simply that the proposal will result in the loss of protected woodland area, and it will affect the ability of the woodland to exist and regenerate on the site in the future in a way that is not currently quantified. I think a key point is that for the tree service comments, we have always viewed this area as a woodland and not as a collection of individual trees. Previous appeals have considered that question specifically of whether this is reasonably a woodland, and inspectors have consistently recognised the woodland character and connection wider with other woodlands of the site. And whilst every application will be considered on its own merit, those previous decisions do reinforce the validity and relevance of the Woodland Tree Preservation Order, on which the tree service itself must recognise. I wanted to clarify for this site particularly what the Tree Preservation Order does and does not do, because a tree preservation order is not intended to create an automatic prohibition on development. However, planning permission is granted, or once planning permission is granted, any tree works that are necessary to implement that position no longer require a separate consent under the tree preservation order. So in practical terms, for the tree service, the protection afforded by the TPO is displaced by the planning permission itself. As a consequence, all necessary safeguards for the woodland must be secured through approved plans and documents, because the TPO cannot subsequently be relied on to stop works on the development sites that would be required to deliver the development. This means that the detail in the application documents is very important, and part of the difficulty in this application is that the full extent of the woodland impact cannot currently be assessed from the information before the application and before members. So I did want to acknowledge that this application and the applicant has taken significant steps towards considering trees on the site. The major trees have been identified, and there has been consistent effort to seek to avoid direct impact on those trees that are present. The application has sought to be no dig, and the result has been to create a very minimal dig approach with the information that we are able to view. However, despite all of the good work on the foundations and raising the buildings and considering the light and shading, There remain a number of important elements where the future implications for woodland growth cannot be properly quantified. And these do include the drainage arrangements, the future maintenance of those drainage situations, and the long-term interaction between the development and the surrounding woodland. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that technical solutions cannot be found. If planning permission is granted, engineers and contractors would find ways to construct the house and install the necessary infrastructure. My concern is that I cannot clarify for members how much woodland area will ultimately be lost to that construction, servicing maintenance and future management pressure. And I cannot be confident how much space will remain for the woodland to flourish. It can be said that the built footprint of the development will prevent future woodland from regenerating and growing in those locations where the driveway or the house is built. Similarly, the drainage and soakaway infrastructure that we looked at earlier, I think must be assumed to prevent future tree growth directly above those installations, and may actually influence a requirement for trees to be removed in a wider area around them. And construction activity itself, however carefully managed, will have some impact on that woodland environment. So that hopefully explains the tree service position as to how the proposal is incompatible with the woodland. I would reassure and emphasise to members that if you were minded to grant planning permission contrary to the recommendation, then there is a comprehensive suite of tree-related planning conditions. The purpose of these conditions would be to minimise the harm to the woodland as far as reasonably possible, and to secure the best level of protection achievable through the planning process. But I would say for members that they should be clear that this would represent harm minimisation, not harm avoidance. And if the development proceeds, there may be circumstances where the only technical achievable solution for constructing or maintaining elements of the development will require additional tree loss, root disturbance, pruning, excavation, or the further sterilisation of some areas from future woodland growth. And in those circumstances, planning conditions cannot guarantee that all woodland impacts can be prevented. The tree service recognises that conditions are generally most effective where an impact is already understood and where a specific mitigation measure can be clearly defined, but conditions would not normally be relied upon to resolve fundamental planning concerns or to defer key questions about the extent of woodland loss. So I think that in all doesn't alter the tree service's conclusion that the proposal is incompatible with the long-term retention, regeneration and natural progression of this woodland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shelley, do you have?
Just with regard to Councillor Virgo does have a blue sheet, which I think we're going to hand round. We
have questions first.
Thanks, Shelley.
Can we have questions first, please, to see whether we want the blue sheet before we do that? Councillor Templeton.
Did I understand you said that the electric cables would be overhead, so they're going to be swinging from one tree to another to bring electricity to that site?
Through you, Chair, I don't think that detail is specified of exactly how the cable will be suspended, but I have seen in the application documents that it will be overhead, so presumably it will go on poles if required. I don't think it would be attached to trees.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I was particularly interested in the presentation from the flood advisor with regards to the infiltration. I have to admit I had no idea you could do that, which is quite interesting. One then wonders why we don't do it more, and I imagine there are issues in terms of sort of potentially odours and things. I would have thought. I was just wondering if you could explain, is there any risk of that kind of impact, particularly on the neighbouring properties, from that form of particularly foul water drainage system?
So through you, Chair. So in terms of the impact, because it's all underground and properly sealed, there is not going to be any odor or any kind of nuisance to the neighbors. There are minimum distances that has to be kept for where the sewage plant has to be situated, and then the drainage field that we talked about has to be situated. The main risk is to groundwater contamination, and that is why there are rules as to how deep they can be installed and the kind of system that has to be used.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Can I just follow on from that? I think you called it a drainage field. Did you say that that would be 2.5 metres by 2.5 metres, or would it be larger? Because that to me seems to take some more area of woodland away.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So that is the measurement that has been provided by the applicant. There are formulas that the EA uses to determine the exact area that it has to take. And in my presentation, I made it clear that I cannot confirm these measurements. It lies with the EA. But the 2.5 by 2.5 is what has been proposed by the applicant as will apply for a typical 3-bedroom dwelling.
And so presumably, if the EA didn't agree with that, it could be bigger or it could be smaller, I suppose. I doubt whether it would be smaller, but I don't know.
Potentially, it could be bigger or smaller.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Smith?
Just with regards to some of the comments made by the officer from the tree service, he's highlighted multiple areas where, I think it's his words, he's essentially said that the impact on the woodland cannot currently be quantified. I was wondering, have we given the applicant sufficient opportunity to supply the details that we would need to quantify that? Have we asked the specific questions and we've just not had the answer back, or is this sort of lost in the gap?
Through you, Chair. So I will be a little bit more precise with my wording to address that question. In terms of the quantification, then the area of the driveway, the size of the house, the area we would assume for the drainage infrastructure, the bit of the treatment plant that has to be sunk below ground. We know the sizes of those from the plans. So perhaps the bit that's not quantified is some of the elements around how much would be required for construction, how many of the trees can be retained in proximity to the drainage infrastructure. But as a crude measure, we can see the size of the driveway, the size of the building, and anything that we allowed for the drainage would be able to be an approximation at least of the area of woodland that would be lost. And in terms of how the tree service views woodland, then it would be significant that the woodland would be fragmented. So where it's a continuous block at the moment, it would be broken into two smaller bits by that introduction that the property would bring. I hope that covers the points raised.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yes, thank you for that answer. I think what I'm just trying to get at here is, I appreciate there are some elements of this which are still unknown, and what I'm trying to understand is how reasonable is that? Obviously in any development there are elements of the detail which are not available at planning stage that follow later, and part of that missing detail has been cited in part, not in whole, but in part for the justification for the recommendation to refuse. And I'm just trying to, understand it. If we're refusing on that basis, is it reasonable that we're refusing an application due to the applicant not having provided some of these details, or actually is this a sort of a fairly par for the course in that we would expect those details to be developed at a later stage? This might be a question perhaps for one of the planning officers rather than the tree officer, if someone's able to maybe assist with that.
Through you, Chair. Yes, my understanding is that the applicant has had opportunities to submit further information, and indeed the drainage officer referred to the surface water drainage solutions and the foul water drainage solutions, which have resulted as a result of that request, which I think previously this application was provisionally put on the agenda for the committee. However, it was understood that there wasn't sufficient information in front of the committee in order for them to be able to make a sort of really informed decision. And so, and that was back in April, so the applicant has had opportunities to submit additional information, and that has now been received. In terms of the overall recommendation, as the Head of Natural Estates has said, there is considered to be a fundamental problem with this issue in that the level of harm that can be quantified is considered to be sufficiently significant that when planning officers have weighed it in the planning balance, that the recommendation is for refusal. However, as the Head of Natural Estates says, that there is potentially an element of additional harm that we can't quantify. But I think the point being is that we can quantify the harm in terms of, exactly as he said, in terms of the extent of the built form, the immediate vicinity of the drainage arrangements, and also the driveway. And on that basis, and the impact that that has on the character of the woodland and the function of the woodland, and in undertaking the planning balance, even in taking into account para 11D and the tilted balance, the recommendation remains for refusal.
Thank you very much for that. Can I have Tony Virgo, please? Councillor Virgo.
Thank you, Chairman. I, like Councillor Smith, was fascinated by Fuse's explanation of the drainage. Absolutely amazing, and thank you for all that. I've learned a lot from it. Can I just sort of ask a question? There are, well, two questions really. There are other houses. There's no main drainage in that road for the houses.
You seem to have lost Tony.
Can you hear me okay?
We can now, yes.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened. I'm very sorry. There are drainage. The other.
Tony, you're very intermittent. Excuse me.
I don't know why this keeps cutting out, but it seems to cut out.
Can we?
I don't know.
Can we get you to re-log on, and we'll take.
Yeah, if I could do that. Can you hear me now?
We can at the moment, yeah.
Okay, let me just pursue then and hope. There are other houses in the road which aren't on main drain.
No.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I've no. It's the.
Oh no.
Does he want to write
it? Nothing changes in this country.
Yes, perhaps you could write it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Jesus.
Tony, you're talking now. Talk.
We'll take some other people, and you come back.
Okay.
Okay.
Fiddle around. All right. Thank you.
Tina.
I know. Thank you. And thank you through you, Chair. Officer Shelley, you said something about the housing in your introduction, the housing and land supply. What were those words again, please? Can you get to that paragraph?
Yes, so here, the council is unable to demonstrate the 5-year housing land supply, so as such the tilted balance is engaged with regards to paragraph 11D of the MPPF. And here, paragraph 11D says that planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of the proposal or the harm significantly and demonstrably outweigh the best benefits. And in this case, we consider that the harm, the adverse impacts, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, obviously for the reasons that we've put forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Could I have another go?
Yes, please do. Councillor
I hope
Virgo.
this. I hope this will work. Sorry, I'm just going on about the sewage problem. There are other houses in the street that have the same problem, presumably, regarding sewage, because they're not on main drainage. So whichever systems they have, they've been approved by the various authorities. Would that be correct?
Yes, that is correct. So I
Yeah.
presented an example on Spinney Lodge that was
Yeah.
approved on the basis of a replacement of an existing septic tank and a
Yeah.
soakaway to a sewage treatment plant and a soakaway. So it was a replacement of a failed system. So I'm not sure what rules the Environment Agency would have applied to
No.
have permitted this. But this is a new development and it has to meet the new binding rules. So if it doesn't, then the onus will be on the applicant to make the application. I would not want to prejudice whether it will be approved or not. It's not my position. I'm only
Understand.
providing advisory rule based on the binding rules.
No, thank you. You've made that very clear, and thank you so much. Stephen, can I ask you a question through Margaret and the chairman, which I think you put very clearly, the trees advice. Could you explain to me how much woodland there is left in that order in terms of acreage?
I can not give you a figure for that, but there's a rectangular block on that site which is entirely covered by the woodland order. The woodland considers the space between the existing trees to still be part of the woodland, because the woodland order is considered to be the opportunity for trees to grow in the future. So the size of the woodland is the size of the rectangular block as far as the tree preservation order is concerned. And as far as just to sort of try and pick up on that final bit of your question as to how much is left, I assumed I should ask for a clarification. Are you talking about after the property would be built? How much would be left?
No, let me clarify the question. In the woodland order, how much does that cover at the moment that are existing? Because I'm just aware that, of course, we've lost a lot with the travellers cutting quite a lot of woodland at just round the corner from that application.
So through you, Chair, the question sounds as though it is about not just the woodland order that is on this application site, but also the other woodland orders that affect the other neighbouring properties. I don't have that information before me. I'm afraid I can't comment on other TPOs that are surrounding the application site.
Could I ask a further question then? I mean, I think there are quite a lot there. When you are ascertaining the damage, presumably the woodland will grow. I mean, you've made 2 points, Stephen, referring also to the drainage, because from my own understanding, from my own house, trees grow extremely quickly. Even though you cut them down, they grow again. I can't quite see the damage, if you understand, because even though they've taken a small piece of land, the forest around will continue to thrive, won't it?
So to answer the question as to whether the woodland areas surrounding the property would continue to thrive, then yes, appropriately managed, whatever is left and remaining of the woodland around the property presumably would continue to thrive. The question and the point perhaps being made in terms of informing the members is that the woodland is currently considered to include all of the areas that are proposed for building work and for construction to be introduced. So that becomes the loss or the harm, for want of a better description, to the woodland as a unit. It's the loss of the ability to grow in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor
Excellent.
Collins?
I've just got a question about the supply of water to the site, is that coming from Birch Lane? And if so, am I right in interpreting your explanation that the water pipe is proposed to come over the ground but under the access? And how big will the pipe be and how will that work?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to give the information that I've seen in the application documents. Yes, the water supply starts in Birch Lane, as far as we're informed. Yes, as you say, the proposal is that that pipe does not need excavation to run across the site, so it will lay on top of the existing soil levels. It will either be within or on top of the new no-dig driveway that is proposed. So that is a structure with a series of cells that sits above the level of the current soil, and the pipe would either run over the top of that, or there may be a way to thread it through without damaging. I'm not sure of that extent of detail. In terms of the size of the pipe, just from my understanding, the supply pipe for a single property is a couple of inches in diameter, perhaps, in a PVC pipe. But yeah, that's exceeded my expertise.
It's called a visualised water pipe. Is that a technical term, or is that just a reference to we think it'll work like that?
I would guess that the details are not exact. It's an impression. It looks like Andy was looking to comment, but I think it just represents that the details might vary slightly, but it's giving an impression of how that issue would be solved of bringing water onto the site without disturbing trees.
Councillor Temperton.
Yeah, back to the drainage. It says, I think it was said that there will be the drainage with infiltration could work, and it's quite intuitive, so that's quite exciting. But it might require high maintenance in order not to affect the woodland. So how would that high maintenance, and how would it be checked that this is actually being efficiently maintained so that it isn't damaging the woodland?
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure whether this is a drainage officer question or a tree question. I can answer from the potential impact to trees, and then I will hand to Efwa perhaps for any additional information. The infrastructure, once it's installed, will discharge the water into the woodland. I think that the system will have a life expectancy of somewhere around 20 years or so. Efwa might be able to guide us a bit further. But at some point, which would be relatively short in the lifespan of a tree, there will be maintenance potentially required to that if it is no longer discharging water at the rates that are required to fulfill its function. At that point, it won't be a technical solution. It will be a dig up and replace, or potentially dig in a new location if it's not economical to recreate that opportunity for water to flow out again if it's become blocked by tree roots. So it will be a difficult challenge, and I think that's part of my concern for why I imagine that there will be no desire to see trees grow over the top of that location, because it may need to be dug up in the future. It's set well back into the woodland to install itself in a natural clearing. That does have the secondary effect of making the transportation of the new equipment back onto the site harder with future growth of trees potentially, because I imagine these are quite big, albeit light structures that need to be worked their way down. So I don't think that will be a problem, but that's, I think, the nature of the replacement and the maintenance.
Thank you.
Yeah, so through you, Chair. So what has been expressed by Stephen is quite accurate in terms of the typical design life of underground drainage systems. Typically it's 20 years, but with the environment that the infrastructure is going to find itself in, we can anticipate rooting, tree roots penetrating into the infrastructure, which would require more robust and regular maintenance regime. And this is the level of information that we would have liked to be presented at this stage as part of our consideration, but that has not been considered by the applicant.
Thank you. Other questions? No? So it falls to me to put the recommendation, but as you probably know, if this recommendation falls, then there is a blue sheet to put an acceptance. So the recommendation is on pages 64, 65 of the agenda papers, to refuse. Oh yes, and with additional information on pages 4 to 6 of the supplementary report. Do I have a seconder for that at the moment?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So for the purposes of debate, we are going ahead. Would somebody like to start the debate, please? Councillor Collins, would you?
Well, I'd like to thank officers for their extremely detailed explanations. I do understand the frustrations of the applicant. This proposal appears to be just one small house in a lane where there are other larger properties currently being built. However, the site is covered by a woodland TPO, which is different to the individual and group TPOs we see more regularly. And for me, the importance of the woodland TPO is that we protect not only the individual trees on the site, but the understory and the ability for the woodland to naturally regenerate. And I believe that the proposed house and access will harm that woodland, and it will not be able to regenerate as it should do. I don't know that we can really consider the other elements because I think there's too much of a question mark still over what the proposals are. And as the the assistant director, has said, it was supposed to come to committee in April, and it has come to committee now instead. So there has been plenty of opportunity to provide additional information on top of the additional information that's already been provided. The woodland should be considered as a collective entity. The report says that, and I'm very concerned about the sterilisation of the growing areas, which is also mentioned in the report under the constructed elements. And for that reason, I am happy that harm has been identified, and therefore I will be approving the recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Smith and then Councillor Mackenzie Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's clear that the applicant has gone to some not inconsiderable effort to design a development here, which is, in sensitivity to the context. And as the tree officers pointed out, it's certainly possible there are technical solutions to design development in these kind of scenarios which can, appropriately mitigate the impact. However, it is likewise a particularly sensitive context, and there are therefore serious questions around whether the measures that are currently proposed sufficient, and that's, you know, that information is all that we can judge this on. I think something for me which is particularly significant is the previous appeal decisions. It's not really clear that this new application addresses the issues raised by the appeals inspectors previously, and I think that's a significant context within which we need to consider this. And I think the thing that makes this hard is the context of the other nearby developments, you know, and I know that members are quite upset about some of those developments and the loss of trees and the damage to the woodland area that has been in some cases permitted. In some cases, I'm aware that there are sort of enforcement cases and things ongoing, but it's very hard when you see what feels like a very modest, very small site where a local resident wants to self-build their own home, and you feel, how do you weigh that in the context of those other nearby sites? I think the thing that really decides this for me, though, is as a committee, we take the natural heritage of our borough incredibly seriously. You know, I've sat through hours and hours and hours of these committee meetings where we've dragged developers over the coals with regards to impact on trees, particularly on some of the major developments that have come through this committee. And I think, we lose all moral authority on this matter if we pick and choose where we take that position. We've got to be consistent. We can't sort of look the other way just because it feels a bit more convenient on a small site. I think, if we're going to argue that position on major developments, we've got to be consistent across all developments we consider. And if we don't, that sets a very dangerous and damaging precedent. So I think on that basis, my view would be to support the officer recommendation to refuse the application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mackenzie Boyle.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair. At the beginning of the report from the officer, it all sounded so very, very pleasant, idyllic, bucolic. So I'm saying, why is it going to have to be refused? The trees have been identified, and it's not beyond the wit of a good developer, and the applicant, I'm sure, has good developer there, to develop around those trees and save the trees. Apparently, we are unable to demonstrate the 5-year land and housing supply. So why are we directed to refuse this application? There's a house. So let's turn it on its head. One house that can contribute to the lack of our 5-year land and housing supply. The other thing too, I'm quite surprised that policies are being upheld. It's tradition, is it not, sometimes for this committee and the officers to ride a coach and horses through our policies, whether they be LP3, LP2, LP35. And looking at the woodland pictures, there are a massive amount of woodland round. So we're looking at trees, we're concentrating on the trees. Yes, we've done the drainage and it looks pretty good. Everything has been looked at. Our officer there has said it's okay. So looking at the trees, frankly, maybe I might be hurtful here. I don't intend to. This is just objective. Why are we so concentrating on trees now when we lost 11 hectares of trees at Beaufort? So let's be consistent, as my colleague said. Let's be consistent.
Thank you. Councillor Virgo.
I hope this is going to last. I think planning is always a judgment. I've listened to the drainage officer and I've listened to the head of trees, and I've looked at the site for a long time. This site is not in the middle of a woodland anymore. This is a semi-suburban site, really. It wasn't years ago, but it certainly is now. And I don't absolutely agree with Councillor Smith on this. I think what the planning committee are there for are to weigh these balances together and make what we think is a sensible decision for our residents. In this particular case, Madam Chairman, I mean, I can understand this about woodland, but there is quite a lot of woodland there. And I'm always disappointed that we didn't replant the woodland further up the road, which I think would have been a much better idea if we wanted to protect it. So I think the harm, in my view, hasn't been, it hasn't come to the surface sufficiently against the other points, which is self-build. We haven't got many self-build in this particular borough. I know we haven't. And the 5-year land supply. And given that this is a small dwelling, and I think we've fallen over backwards, I think actually I've read a lot of this stuff, and I think, you know, to be honest with you, I think the applicant has, with the aid of his agent, has supplied quite a lot of information. And I'm quite absolutely convinced that the officers, if we so decided to go against recommendations and approve it, would make sure that it was delivered in a very sustainable way. So I would say, I'm not convinced by the arguments for refusal. I'd like to suggest approving it, and I can't, obviously I'm not in the room, but as Shelley has suggested, there is a motion there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vogo. Yeah, there is a blue sheet to be had if somebody would like to propose it and second it. When we get to that point, any other speakers, please? Councillor Penfold.
I have very mixed, rather confused thoughts. I like the look of the house and I love the idea of a forest garden. I think it could work. But I think there are lots of things we have to be very careful of as it's being developed, if it's being developed. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Anybody else online? Councillor Zahoudin? No?
No more comments from my side.
I missed out. It's Dorothy. I would have, because I've missed it, I'm getting where I am. I wouldn't have, I know I'm not allowed to speak. Sorry.
No, sorry, we are not.
I know, darling. I wish I could have.
Never
Thank
mind.
you.
Okay, thank you.
There is the blue sheet.
There is, yes, we know. Okay, so we've heard about the pros and cons and about the woodland situation and the harm that would be done to the, not just the driveway, but we've got to have somewhere to put materials while the development is going on, the footprint of the house, and the difficulties with the drainage system. I do wonder if the water input might freeze up. I don't understand how that can work, really, water in a pipe above ground. Yeah, I am deeply concerned by the sterilisation of this area, which it should be part of new growth of the forest of woodland. When I was there on our site visit, I was very careful where to put my feet because I could see there were little pine trees coming up, little trees growing amongst all the leaf mould and so on. And I was very conscious that this is woodland in the making. And so personally, I really wouldn't like to see any building on that site. We need to preserve what woodland that we can. So on that note, may I take a vote? And if the falls?
Can I just add again, just for people online, members of the public, that Councillors Loredini, Virgo, Mackenzie Boyle and Councillor Hayes has joined us online. They won't be able to vote on this application, just to make that clear.
Thank you for that. So those in the room, please would you show if you accept the recommendation to refuse, please?
That's six for the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Is that everybody? No, there was abstention.
One abstention. Thank you. So the motion to refuse is carried.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, I'm going to bow out at this point as I'm with people here, so forgive me. I'm going to leave you.
Thank you. Thanks for your input. Bye. Bye. Okay, now the final. I'm sorry about this. Dex has had to wait and wait and wait. But our final application is, good Lord, 7 Alban Road, proposed front side extension, first floor, rear side infill, etc. Would you like to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. We're doing a joint presentation, so I'm reading and Dex is going to do the technology. That's okay. 7 Alban Road, Binfield. On the side, this application is for a proposed front side extension, first floor rear side infill extension and a loft conversion with dormer. Slide 2 shows this is the application site, and the application shows where the area will be infilled, and I think it's showing with the arrow there, with Dex's cursor. These are proposed plans and elevations that show the extent of the proposed changes, both before and after. On slide 4, you can see that many of the houses in the area have been extended and altered, and it is not considered that the proposed changes would impact the street scene, nor would there be any impact to neighbouring occupiers. The existing space would be lost due to the side extension, but it would be replaced on the opposite side of the road on land controlled by the applicant. And whilst there would be a shortfall in off-street parking spaces, properties currently use the carriageway for parking, and that's accepted practice. As this is an unmade road, it's considered that vehicles are likely to travel at slow speeds, which would allow space for cars to pass safely, and a reason for refusal could not be sustained on highway grounds. The scheme is considered to accord with all relevant policies within the development plan and is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions set out in section 11 of the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have anything further to add from Dexter? Get the technical stuff later. Okay. Questions for the officers? Councillor Collins.
Yes, I'm concerned about the parking. I know you received a new plan. I had a look at it. It shows the parking space opposite the house with the parking space being end in, so sticking out into the road, well, on the verge. But it didn't show, I don't think, the existing spaces, and I believe they're end on as well. Could you confirm that? And therefore whether there is sufficient space between the two for, say, emergency vehicles?
Through your Chair, Andy Wells, Highways. The existing situation is the result of use rather than the result of planning, and what is currently used for end-in parking adjacent to the properties in that stretch of Alban Road is what is in the title deeds for those properties as carriageway and shared access. and therefore the space that is proposed as a replacement for that lost adjacent to the property is on an area that was originally verge and therefore not part of that area that is intended to be carriageway. Let's see if I can share my screen. We can see a bit of history. Find the meeting. There we go. As we can see, the street view in this area is very old, March 2011, which provides us with a useful reference point as to how this looked and how it was envisaged in terms of the access way adjacent to the properties and this grass verge area here. Now, this doesn't look like this now, and as we saw in the photos in the presentation, a lot of the neighbours are parking in the manner as these cars are beyond the application site, end into this carriageway area. There is sufficient width in here to pass and repass, and there is sufficient width for emergency vehicles with a vehicle parked in here, albeit that the parking adjacent to the property, which is not shown on the plan deliberately, is an informal arrangement that is used by this property and by neighbouring properties as part of their day-to-day operation on what is an unadopted road, and therefore this has become the accepted practice rather than necessarily being what was intended. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I'll have a supplementary which you may also be able to answer. Where are they planning to keep the bins?
I'll pass it to that.
Through you, Chair. It's been confirmed they'll be kept down side alley or in the rear garden when they're not out for collection.
And is there sufficient space? Because I thought we were building forward.
Through you, Chair. There is still side access.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, please? Questions? I keep wondering about the pedestrians on this road, but I don't suppose there's any sort of ruling about that on a private road, is there?
Through you, Chair, it's how the existing road operates. It's how all the existing dwellings through this private road operate. They walk down the carriageway. It's very low speed. It's unmade. And as with many shared surface roads within the borough, both adopted and unadopted, it seems to work relatively well at a slow speed. And this extension proposal to the property doesn't make a significant difference to that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Nobody online? Okay, let us put the recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions and informatives outlined on page 73, 74 of the agenda papers, and noting the amendment to condition 2 outlined in pages 6 to 7 of the supplementary report, please. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Collins, thank you very much. Anyone wish to speak to this? No? Seems very straightforward, really. Shall we take the vote? Those in favour of approving this, please.
It's unanimous for those in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry that we made some of our officers wait and wait and wait, but we're all done now. We can all go home. Thank you for attending this evening.